Chapter 1924. Su Xiaolan was a little stunned, but she was also a little touched. She had never imagined that Lin would actually do something as shocking as making the great Empress Vermilion Bird kneel first in order to protect her dignity. After a brief moment of blankness, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's entire body trembled uncontrollably. Had she ever knelt before anyone else? The 6 Vermilion Bird sages were at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, and they were the most powerful beings below the God of Creation stage. However, they were all fawning over the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Who could make her kneel? Yes, as one of the 4 strongest saints in the star field and the one and only saint seat, she was the holiest, proudest, and noblest person in the world. How could she kneel to someone else? But now, she was kneeling before a mixed-blood human. Even Lin didn't know how much damage this had inflicted on the great Empress Vermilion Bird. PFFF. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was so furious that she spat out a mouthful of blood. The wounds all over her body split open, and blood gushed out like a waterfall. Every drop of blood was comparable to a divine item. An obvious crack had already appeared in her Tao heart. The extremely proud, great Empress Vermilion Bird was actually kneeling to someone. This was a psychological blow that was no less than killing her. "I want you dead." The great Empress Vermilion Bird let out an enraged roar, and platinum-colored flames erupted from her body. These flames carried with them a might that could incinerate all things as they surged toward Lin. Playing with fire in front of me? Lin hurriedly retreated, and a scarlet divine ring suddenly appeared above his head. It contained absolute law energy that enveloped the oncoming flames. The surging platinum-colored holy flame seemed to have received an absolute command and stopped in the air. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's body trembled slightly. It was as if flames that could purify everything were burning before her eyes. I, the Vermilion Bird, am the supreme being that wields the power of fire. She suddenly let loose a piercing cry that no human could make. Her voice was ethereal, as if she had transcended this world. And Lin suddenly felt that the feeling of being able to control all flames had suddenly disappeared, and an extremely transcendent existence had appeared, forcibly vying for control with him. That existence also possessed an extremely supreme origin authority. A pair of dazzling wings unfurled from the great Empress Vermilion Bird's back. She walked towards Lin with her bare feet. Lotuses bloomed with every step she took, and each lotus actually possessed the power to destroy a world. They were like raging flames, releasing an extremely shocking power. I was born in the primal chaos of the universe and will never be extinguished. I control the flames of heaven and earth and command millions of feathers. Even if the heavens collapse and the earth are destroyed, I can still protect the southern border and let the holy might exist forever. What do you have to fight with me? A holy mark in the form of a vermilion bird appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's forehead, and she made a grasping motion toward Lin. The holy flame that was under Lin's control started to move again, and it roared as it pounced toward Lin. This was the first time Lin had used his elemental authority and lost control of it. His expression shifted drastically as he drew his evil-slaying sword and slashed down. The holy flame was split in two before quickly merging back together. Its might did not weaken at all. It continued to give off a holy might that seemed to be able to incinerate everything as it leapt towards Lin. Not only did this flame contain the essential power of the Vermilion Bird, but also contained the eternal and indestructible property of the Holy Birth. And Lin felt troubled for the first time. He was clearly the heavenly fire god, a paramount being who controlled the Tao of fire. However, he was completely helpless against the flames before him. Die. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's hatred toward Lin caused her expression to contort slightly. She clapped her hands together. An indestructible holy flame engulfed Lin from all directions. Then it suddenly exploded. Boom! The earth quaked, and the white ball of flames swelled continuously like a sun as it engulfed everything in its surroundings. Heat-resistant plants, powerful flame beasts, and flaming terrain were all annihilated by this attack. Not a single one survived. However, in the center of the holy flame sun, a blade of wind and snow suddenly tore open a passageway. Power of all creation, myriad phenomena with a single thought. Since he was unable to control the flames, he would use other powers to fight against the great Empress Vermilion Bird. In any case, apart from the power of the fire god, Enlin still had 6 other powers that he could use. The wind and snow parted a path. Enlin transformed into a bolt of golden void lightning and approached the great Empress Vermilion Bird at a terrifying speed. At the same time, his fist was imbued with the boundless power of the 5 elements, and he punched toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. The speed of the power of lightning and the power of the phenomenal success divine body combined to unleash a might that surpassed that of an ordinary god of creation's attack. "You can actually break through my holy flame?" A ferocious expression appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. It was as if there was no power behind her fist, as heaven and earth instantly darkened. Boom! A shockwave spread out in a ring-shaped manner, tearing apart everything in its path. The power of the 5 elements and the domineering brute force clashed and tore at each other. Enlin's attack this time was much more powerful than the previous one. However, he had crippled the great Empress Vermilion Bird's hand last time. This time, however, they were evenly matched. Not only was the great Empress Vermilion Bird good at playing with fire, but even her physical body was comparable to the 5-elemental body of the war god at the phenomenal success divine body of the war god. This made it impossible for Enlin to target the great Empress Vermilion Bird's physical weakness. After this collision, the two of them were both knocked back by the tremendous force. Enlin knew that the great Empress Vermilion Bird could be even more powerful. However, she had been severely wounded during the battle with Pangu, and she had yet to recover from her injuries. Moreover, the Vermilion Bird Heart essence had also been shattered by his attack. This caused her to be even with Enlin. Just as these thoughts were running through his mind, countless crimson, flaming feathers suddenly pierced toward him. The great Empress Vermilion Bird actually launched another attack as she was knocked back. Her wings flapped rapidly, and countless crimson, blood-like feathers shot out. Each flaming feather was comparable to the sharpest divine tool, and they were capable of tearing through everything. Enlin's heart jolted, and he gave up on the idea of using his physical body to defend against the flaming feathers. Instead, he drew his evil-slaying sword and slashed out a dense sword net to block the flaming feathers' attacks. However, the might of the flaming feathers' attacks was far too terrifying. Every time they collided, it was as if a god of creation had unleashed a full-force attack. Even Enlin's arm felt like it was being torn apart. In the end, a flaming feather managed to escape and ruthlessly stabbed into Enlin's waist. Not only was the feather as hard as a divine tool, but it also contained a holy rank Vermilion Bird power that could melt through anything. Rip! Enlin's body of the war god was sliced open. The flaming feather pierced through his divine body, and a wisp of the Vermilion Bird's origin power surged into his body through the wound. He was just about to purge this wisp of power. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly smiled. "I've finally caught you." Origin blood splashed out from her body and condensed into a crimson holy seal in the sky. A light enshrouded both Enlin and the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Blood sacrifice, Vermilion Bird holy forbidden technique. Boundless reincarnation flames. Construct karma, spatial displacement. Enlin was just about to resist when he discovered that the Vermilion Bird's power was desperately trying to teleport him away. In fact, the Vermilion Bird even expended a huge amount of its origin power. Under the impact of the torrential energy, the remnant Vermilion Bird power in his wound connected with the Vermilion Bird power in the outside world. This caught Enlin off guard. When Enlin came to his senses again, he had already been teleported to another location in the Vermilion Bird star system. To put it more accurately, he had been teleported to the interior of a terrifyingly powerful sun. Chapter 1925. The unimaginably high temperature instantly charred Lin's skin black. Lin was subjected to a frenzied pressure and impact within the core of the sun. This was not ordinary sun true flames. It wasn't like he had never eaten ordinary suns before, but these flames were far less terrifying than this. There was no life, no space, and no matter within these incessant flames. There were only flames that could incinerate everything and were imbued with the ability to reincarnate endlessly. And Lin's appearance was like a foreign object. The power of the entire sun was repelling and attacking Lin, trying to incinerate and erase this foreign object. As such, the attacks that Lin was facing were unimaginably overwhelming. Lin endured unimaginable pain, as if his body was going to melt and evaporate in the next second. He immediately used his heavenly fire power to try and control the flames of this sun, only to find that it was King ineffective. The flames of this sun contained the absolute will of the vermilion bird, and it was not under his control at all. Or rather, he was not powerful enough, so the power of his laws was not strong enough. Not only that, but this sun also dragged Lin into a strange, burning reincarnation cycle. No matter how he moved, he would return to the core of the sun in the next second. There was no way he could escape. Lin wanted to use his sword to slice open the sun, but the flames immediately healed as soon as they were split apart. Flames could also reincarnate, and they could reincarnate from death to life. He could only use his other 6 heavenly fire powers to form a protective barrier and desperately resist the onslaught of the flames. This was a terrifying flame-killing formation. Even if Lin could withstand the onslaught of the flames, he would eventually be unable to withstand the endless onslaught. When that time came, it would be his doomsday. As this sun burned Lin, it didn't forget to slowly revolve around the vermilion bird planet. It was also a member of the 9-star system. At this moment, the neighboring star suddenly exclaimed in surprise. The vermilion bird used the reincarnation sun to deal with that human? That's making a mountain out of a molehill. Using this kind of mystic technique will not only reduce the user's life essence, but it will also affect their own Tao. It can be said that this is a technique that kills 1,000 enemies while inflicting 800 casualties on oneself. You're actually willing to pay such a price in order to drag your enemy into the reincarnation flames and torture them to your heart's content. Is your enemy too strong, or is your hatred too deep? Fixed Star ridiculed softly, then used his penetrative vision to look at the situation inside. Seeing that the other party was still stubbornly holding on, Fixed Star could not help but reveal a look of surprise. Strange cultivation, strange divine body, strange power. Everything about this human is strange. Just where did this peerless monster pop out from? Could it be Tai Chu? The vermilion bird clearly only wanted to absorb her inheritor's bloodline, but who would have thought that it would involve such a freak? Sigh, what a pity. He shouldn't have provoked the vermilion bird so quickly. Fixed Star sighed regretfully, and then suddenly fell into hesitation. Should I save him? Should I save him or not? Forget it. Everything has its own destiny. If he dies, then so be it. Who told him to provoke the vermilion bird? Just be careful in your next life. Eternal Star shook its head regretfully, giving up on the idea of rescuing Lin. Meanwhile, on the immortal vermilion star, Flame Heart Immortal Realm. After the great Empress Vermilion Bird dragged Lin away, her cold eyes turned toward the nearby Su Xiaolan, and a faint smile appeared on her face. All right, I've finally gotten rid of that annoying fly. Now, only you and I are left in this world, and Lin won't be killed by you so easily. Su Xiaolan looked at the great Empress Vermilion Bird as her fingers continued to carve divine patterns on her body. The great Empress Vermilion Bird walked towards Su Xiaolan step by step, and her terrifying holy birth aura crushed down upon the latter's body. Her face was still filled with endless greed and hatred. What a perfect person. Your development has already far surpassed my imagination. If it weren't for the fact that I urgently need a pure bloodline power, perhaps I really would have made you my successor to the holy birth. The great Empress Vermilion Bird placed a finger on her luscious red lips, and her scorching gaze wandered over the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. If I absorb everything of you into my body, I'll definitely be able to make up for my incomplete body. That's right, I kneel to you. However, if I eat you and fuse you into my body, then you'll become a part of my Vermilion Bird. Isn't that equivalent to kneeling to myself? That way, I'll still be the proudest, noblest, and purest me. Su Xiaolan's lips twitched. Even at a time like this, she's still brooding over kneeling to me? Come, become a part of me. The great Empress Vermilion Bird spat out the Vermilion Bird Heart essence again. The crimson bead slowly rotated, exuding a boundlessly enchanting light. This caused Su Xiaolan's bloodline to throb, and she wanted to throw herself into the Vermilion Bird Heart essence like a moth flying into a flame. A determined expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face as she gripped her dragon sparrow sword tightly. You still want to resist? The great Empress Vermilion Bird chuckled. Everything you have was given to you by me. What are you going to use to fight against me? She pressed down toward the nearby Su Xiaolan. Kneel. Boom. The supreme decree of the great Empress Vermilion Bird fell upon Su Xiaolan's body. As expected, Su Xiaolan's Vermilion Bird bloodline would immediately submit to her. Moreover, Su Xiaolan's body would also kneel toward her. Sure enough, Su Xiaolan's knees began to bend. However, in the next instant, lightning crackled. The earth exploded. Su Xiaolan charged toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird at an incredible speed. Her dragon sparrow sword was imbued with a boundless dragon might, and it slashed down toward the Vermilion Bird Heart essence like the roar of a divine dragon. Boom! An extreme sharpness tore at the Vermilion Bird Heart essence in a frenzy. The location of her slash was the exact location wherein Lin had struck the Vermilion Bird Heart essence. Cracks appeared once again. Tearing open an old wound was much easier than creating a new one in an undamaged location. The Vermilion Bird Heart essence that had just healed with great difficulty was once again destroyed. By the time the great Empress Vermilion Bird reacted, it was already too late. The dragon sparrow sword had already sliced the Vermilion Bird Heart essence in half. No, the great Empress Vermilion Bird roared hysterically as she swatted a palm towards Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan raised her sword in front of her, and a boundless power caused the dragon sparrow sword to tremble violently. Her body flew backward, but she still opened her mouth at this moment. Roar! The green dragon's breath was like a surging flood that instantly engulfed the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. However, in the next instant, a scorching holy flame exploded and incinerated the flood of dragon's breath. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's expression was extremely dispirited, and she swallowed the Vermilion Bird Heart essence again. However, she continued to vomit blood. Impossible. This is impossible. How can you still attack me? Su Xiaolan stopped in her tracks, and her dragon sparrow sword swam through the air like a lightning dragon. When Lin was fighting against you, why did you engrave divine patterns on my body? It was to seal the damned Vermilion Bird bloodline in my body. You can command the Vermilion Bird bloodline, so I'll seal it. Semi-transparent, golden, jade-like dragon scales started to appear on Su Xiaolan's snow-white skin. Dragon horns started to appear on her head, and her voice was cold and proud. Everything I have was given to me by you. I'm sorry, but even without the Vermilion Bird bloodline, I can still torture you. Crack! The jade pendant of the Azure Dragon Tribe's guardian deity was shattered by Su Xiaolan. Chapter 1926. The main star of the Azure Dragon Tribe, the Dragon Origin Star. This was a mighty star that would never be destroyed. It suddenly trembled lightly. Then, an immeasurable star power pierced through space and directly landed on the azure-clothed female on the immortal Vermilion Star. Not only that, but the Tao realm true intent, mind power, and mysterious fortune of the entire Azure Dragon Tribe all started to strengthen the azure-clothed female's body. Su Xiaolan crushed the guardian deity Jade Pendant, which allowed her to temporarily obtain the power of a god of creation. At this moment, she was truly a guardian deity who was under the protection of the Azure Dragon tribe. She was a true god. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, I came here to settle my karma with you. I wanted to repay you. Even if you took away my Vermilion Bird bloodline, I wouldn't have any complaints. But you wanted to absorb my fortune, absorb my soul, and take away everything I have. A pair of Azure Dragon wings appeared on Su Xiaolan's back. The dense holy patterns on the wings shone with a dazzling light, and the aura of the Origin Azure Dragon soared into the sky. I'm sorry, but we're enemies now. Su Xiaolan roared. Her eyes became pure gold, and her dragon might transformed into golden ripples that swept through the entire immortal Vermilion Star. The divine Tao avatar then appeared, condensing into a boundlessly majestic Azure Dragon that existed eternally in the universe, entrenched on the planet. This scene terrified all the living beings on the immortal Vermilion Star. Some were knocked unconscious by the Azure Dragon's aura, while others flew around in fear. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! My God, such a huge dragon! Is this the Azure Dragon's true body? Hurry and run. Leave this star. Many of the Vermilion Bird tribe living beings had already lost their minds in fear. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages and Mo hurriedly rushed toward the Vermilion Bird spell altar. Then, they saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird confronting Su Xiaolan, and they were completely dumbfounded. The scene unfolding before their eyes had exceeded their imaginations. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's feathers were drenched in blood, and the dragon-horned Su Xiaolan was exuding extremely terrifying auras. What's going on? Why are they fighting? The Vermilion Bird spell Altar's formation had the ability to isolate itself from the outside world and conceal the movements within. Initially, the great Empress Vermilion Bird planned to quietly devour Su Xiaolan. However, who would have thought that Su Xiaolan would actually draw upon the power of the Dragon Origin Star and materialize an Azure Dragon? In the end, the outside world still discovered what was happening inside. Is this really Su Xiaolan? Mo felt that his outlook on cultivation had received an unprecedented blow. He knew that Su Xiaolan was powerful, but he couldn't imagine that she was powerful enough to fight against the supreme being of the Vermilion Bird tribe. The little girl who used to follow him around and call him senior brother was now able to battle against a being that even the Vermilion Bird sect had to look up to. The great Empress Vermilion Bird is in danger. Let's go and save her. Kill. Eliminate these despicable and treacherous humans. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages roared with rage as they pounced towards Su Xiaolan. However, they were stopped by the Vermilion Bird spell Altar's spell formation. The Vermilion Birds were instantly embarrassed. The great Empress Vermilion Bird refused to let us help. This is a battle that belongs to Great Empress Vermilion Bird. She doesn't need our help at all. Yes, that must be it. Su Xiaolan is just a slightly bigger worm in front of her. Wouldn't it be an insult to her if we help her without permission? Let's just wait here for the results of the battle. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages immediately thought things through, and they began to converse in a relaxed manner. Mo suddenly panicked. Only now did he realize that he and the 6 Vermilion Bird sages seemed to be standing on opposite sides. If they were to deal with him, Mo swallowed his saliva discreetly and moved to hide behind a rock. You can't see me. You can't see me. As expected, the 6 Vermilion Bird sages didn't look at him, or rather, they couldn't be bothered to look at him. Compared to the great Empress Vermilion Bird's battle, Mo wasn't worth their attention even for a second. At this moment, the Azure Dragon on the immortal Vermilion Star had already lowered its head and was staring at the great Empress Vermilion Bird. A tremendous dragon might instantly cause the earth around the great Empress Vermilion Bird to cave in. Suppressed by the boundless dragon might, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's bloodline started to churn, and a desire to contend against it surfaced in her heart. This is the projection of the Azure Dragon Holy Birth. An expression of astonishment appeared on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's face. Isn't this a power that only the guardian deities of the Azure Dragon tribe can wield? How can you? Rip! The void trembled. Su Xiaolan instantly appeared before the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Her hand formed into a dragon claw, and an azure holy light tore through everything like lightning. The azure dragon in the sky also struck out with its claw at the same time. At this moment, it was as if Su Xiaolan had transformed into a real azure dragon, and a boundless azure dragon power surged furiously toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly folded her wings and wrapped them around her body. Boom! Lightning, clouds, and gales exploded at the same time. The great Empress Vermilion Bird groaned in pain, and her body flew back like a streak of light. Then, she crashed heavily into the spell formation of the Vermilion Bird spell Altar and spat out another mouthful of blood. Great Empress Vermilion Bird. No! The 6 Vermilion Bird sages stared at this scene in astonishment. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was actually sent flying by Su Xiaolan. She was sent flying by a human woman? Ha! Great Empress Vermilion Bird, are your injuries already that severe? Su Xiaolan smiled faintly. Her breathing was like billowing clouds as she quickly adapted to her newfound power. The great Empress Vermilion Bird. You two shameless starts. Each of you sneak attacked me once, and you still have the cheek to say such things? Su Xiaolan raised her chin, and her hands transformed into agile dragon claws. A destructive power that could tear apart an entire planet surged as she charged toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird again. Cut the crap. I'm going to tear you apart. The projection of an azure dragon danced around Su Xiaolan's body, and the projection of the azure dragon Holy Birth strengthened the sky. At this moment, her power was extremely domineering, and she was like a mini Tyrannosaurus Rex as she stabbed her claws toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's hands became crimson gold in color as she quickly blocked Su Xiaolan's attacks. Boom, boom, boom. The collision between the two of them was earth-shattering, and it was as if a series of thunderclaps had erupted. Just the energy that escaped from their clash was enough to shatter the void and shatter mountains and rivers. This was a direct clash between the paramount Azure Dragon power and the paramount Vermilion Bird power. When Bai Shui and Qi Yu activated their guardian deity Jade pendants, they could both unleash power comparable to a god of creation stage mighty figure. Su Xiaolan had undergone the baptism of the Dragon Dao Pond and reached the Dao integration pinnacle stage. Her power alone was already superior to Bai Shui and Qi Yu's. Now that she activated her guardian deity Jade pendants, how could a normal god of creation stage mighty figure compare to her? Even though she was facing a holy birth Vermilion Bird, especially a severely wounded one, she wasn't afraid in the slightest. Azure Dragon Holy Technique, Star Plucking. Su Xiaolan suddenly grabbed toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird, and a terrifying suction force erupted from her claws. It was as if she wanted to grasp everything before her in her hands. Rip! Su Xiaolan tore off a large handful of feathers from the great Empress Vermilion Bird's wings. The great Empress Vermilion Bird flared up in rage upon seeing this. This was like a girl tearing off her clothes in a fight. This was a massive humiliation. Chirp! The great Empress Vermilion Bird shrieked. The feathers in Su Xiaolan's hands suddenly erupted with a blinding light. Crap! Su Xiaolan's expression changed drastically, and she was just about to fling the feathers away. Boom! The feathers exploded. A ball of holy flames that was even hotter than the sun engulfed Su Xiaolan's body. Chapter 1927. Su Xiaolan flew out from the holy flame explosion in an extremely disheveled manner. Her entire body was covered in varying degrees of burns, and a portion of her dragon claw had been burnt off. An azure holy light enveloped her wounds. Then, it unleashed an extremely powerful healing power to treat her burns. However, she didn't even get a chance to catch her breath before another frightening energy fluctuation erupted from in front of her. A red figure dashed towards Su Xiaolan at an incredible speed. Like a divine sword piercing through the air, it ruthlessly stabbed toward her heart. Su Xiaolan twisted her body, and a black figure instantly appeared before the red figure. Boom! The great Empress Vermilion Bird's arm was bent by the massive force. She focused her gaze and discovered that a golden dragon tail covered in scales had appeared before her. "Do you not want to be a human anymore?" The great Empress Vermilion Bird roared in rage. Her other hand swiftly broke through Su Xiaolan's defenses and slammed into her chest. Su Xiaolan felt as if a burst of explosive energy was going to instantly annihilate her. However, before this power could destroy her body, an azure dragon power that flowed like water started to quickly neutralize the great Empress Vermilion Bird's power. Bam! Su Xiaolan was sent flying by the great Empress Vermilion Bird's slap. At this moment, 90% of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's power had already been neutralized. However, there was still another 10% that was wreaking havoc within her body. This power was enough to destroy any Dao integration stage super mighty figure. However, Su Xiaolan relied on her freakish physical body to forcefully resist it. Whoosh! The sound of space exploding could be heard. The great Empress Vermilion Bird appeared before Su Xiaolan again. Her expression was one of arrogance and ferocity, and an extremely terrifying aura engulfed Su Xiaolan's body. Then, Su Xiaolan saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird's figure instantly flash in 99 different directions and unleash 99 different attacks. Each of these attacks contained a supreme divine ability that targeted her unique weakness. Su Xiaolan injected all of her Azure Dragon power into the Dragon Sparrow sword. The sword projection was like water, but it was also like a swimming azure dragon. It surged incessantly and accurately blocked all of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's attacks. Again and again. They collided again and again. The two of them were becoming more and more evenly matched. In particular, after Su Xiaolan had gotten used to this immense power, she became more and more adept at dealing with the great Empress Vermilion Bird's attacks. From time to time, she could even unleash counterattacks that caused even the great Empress Vermilion Bird to shudder in fear. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was extremely sullen. Never in her wildest dreams would she have imagined that she would be able to fight evenly with someone who she had previously regarded as a piece of meat. Even though she was severely wounded and had expended a lot of energy to kill Lin, it was still a piece of cake for her to torture a weak god of creation. However, the power that Su Xiaolan had just unleashed was not something that a weak god of creation could compare to. Su Xiaolan's current power was slightly more powerful than Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo's. Therefore, a scene that shocked billions of living beings appeared. Right now, the entire Vermilion Bird star system knew that the great Empress Vermilion Bird was battling a powerful being from the Azure Dragon tribe. The immortal Vermilion Star was a planet that had been reinforced by layers upon layers of laws. It was extremely sturdy, and even if tens of thousands of high-yield nuclear bombs were to fall on it, it wouldn't even scratch an itch. However, the immortal Vermilion Star was currently engulfed in a destructive aura. The tectonic plates were shifting and trembling incessantly, and it looked as if the entire star was about to collapse. Kacha-boom! The Vermilion Bird spell Altar's formation was destroyed. Su Xiaolan and the great Empress Vermilion Bird soared into the sky at the same time. They transformed into two streaks of light, one green and one red, and they continuously collided with one another. Every time they collided, it was as if a small sun had exploded. Without the restriction of the Vermilion Bird spell Altar's spell formation, the destructive power of their battle was no longer restrained, and the shockwaves of their battle began to wreak havoc on the immortal Vermilion Star. Azure Dragon Ancestral Aura. Su Xiaolan opened her mouth and exhaled toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. An azure golden breath that contained the power of time soared into the sky. It was as if it were the boundless river of the galaxy, eternal and inextinguishable. Even the great Empress Vermilion Bird's protective holy flame was torn open by this Azure Dragon Ancestral Aura. She sensed a fatal threat from this breath. She couldn't take it head on. The great Empress Vermilion Bird instantly entered into an extremely mystical state. She was ethereal and untraceable like smoke. When the azure golden breath crashed in her body, It was as if it had crashed into a wisp of smoke and instantly disappeared. Su Xiaolan's dragon scale stood on end. She had detected a presence that was rapidly approaching her. Furthermore, this presence was using a method that was even faster than spatial skipping. Primal Chaos Flash. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird appeared in front of Su Xiaolan. Her slender hands intertwined to form a vermilion bird soaring holy seal. Then, she ruthlessly imprinted this seal onto Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan slashed her sword toward the sky. However, she was greeted by the sight of a vermilion bird that could blot out the entire sky with its wings extended. This vermilion bird carried a boundless origin power as it pounced toward her. Then, it crushed her into the ground. This power was far too vast, and Su Xiaolan was completely unable to dodge it. Boom! An earth-shattering crimson energy shockwave erupted and engulfed everything in the surroundings. Countless living beings died amid blood-curdling screams, and one towering mountain peak after another was instantly razed to the ground. When the energy shockwave dissipated, a vermilion bird insignia had appeared in the ground within a radius of 5,000 kilometers. Su Xiaolan stood in the center of the crater and panted heavily as she held onto her sword with both hands. She actually blocked it. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird in the sky was even more astonished. Her breathing was also slightly chaotic as she narrowed her eyes and looked down at Su Xiaolan. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, we've come to assist you. Charge! Kill this despicable human. The 6 vermilion bird sages spread open their wings and pounced towards Su Xiaolan with powerful might. Azure Dragon Holy Technique. Descending dragon raises its head. Su Xiaolan's sword moved along with the dragon. At some point in time, the gigantic azure dragon that occupied the entire immortal vermilion star had already arrived behind Su Xiaolan. Then it raised its head and soared into the sky. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly self-detonated, and boundless milky white holy flames engulfed the entire sky. An extremely noble and proud crimson vermilion bird descended from the sky with boundless origin flames around it. In this instant, it was as if the billions of living beings in the vermilion bird star system could see the collision between an azure dragon and a vermilion bird. The collision between the azure and crimson energies tore the heavens and earth into azure and crimson colors at the same time. Heaven and earth were annihilated. Save me. The 6 vermilion bird sages, who had just arrived to assist the Great Empress, were blasted flying by the terrifying shockwaves from the collision between the 2 vermilion birds and Great Empress vermilion birds. The massive immortal vermilion star was also blasted into oblivion by the shockwaves from the collision. This caused the star to deviate from its original orbit, and it became a wandering immortal vermilion ball. Mo-Hai fled with all his might, and that was why he hadn't been killed by the shockwaves. He looked behind him with lingering fear in his heart. He could only see boundless destruction and disaster, as well as the scenes of 2 gigantic holy beasts clashing and tearing at each other. Everything else had been replaced by an azure and a crimson color. In the boundless universe, only 2 things were real. The azure dragon roared as it circled the star, and the vermilion bird's wings covered the sky as it let out a clear cry. This scene was like a primordial painting. It was beautiful, majestic, and boundless. It was a kind of dynamic eternity, and it gave off a feeling of surrealism. Chapter 1928. Enlin was still trapped in the star. He used almost every method he could think of to break through the reincarnation flames of the star, but to no avail. The flames of reincarnation crazily attacked the heavenly god's defenses. They were boundless, and their strength was even slowly increasing. Their attacks didn't seem to be weakening at all. If this went on, Enlin really wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. The commotion caused by the battle between the vermilion bird and the azure dragon had already reached the inner part of the star he was on. Little Lan has already used her final trump card. If she can't defeat the Great Empress Vermilion Bird, she'll be in grave danger once the time limit for her explosive technique expires. Enlin was extremely worried. What would he do? Was there any other way to break through this endless reincarnation force? If this sun was an ordinary sun, Lin would have swallowed it in a matter of minutes. In any case, it was not like he had never swallowed it before, so he would not be as conflicted as he was now. Wait a minute, swallowed? That's right. Why can't I swallow the boundless reincarnation fire? Lin didn't know much about other things, but when it came to food, he always took it one step at a time. The power of the boundless reincarnation fire was much more terrifying than the sun essence. But his own strength was also much stronger. He should be able to swallow it. Let's have a taste first. Lin opened his mouth and activated an engulfment spell technique. At the same time, the shadow of a huge black void whale appeared behind him. He was using the unique power of the void beast in his sea of vital energy. His devouring talent was extremely powerful, and there was a high chance that he could devour the power in front of him into his sea of vital energy to safely digest it. Chi, a jet-black vortex began to suck in the flames in front of it. The scorching platinum flames in front of him surged crazily and were then sucked into the vortex. And Lin was overjoyed when he saw this. He thought to himself, boundless reincarnation fire, reincarnation immortal. I want to see how you can reincarnation immortal in my stomach. Rumble. The platinum flames rushed into his energy sea. The extremely hot flames instantly illuminated the entire chi sea. Then, the flames began to spread and attack in a frenzy. Within his sea of vital energy, the little whale, the holy flame vermilion bird, and Kirin, little Xian Wu, and little white tiger were all given a fright by the flames before unleashing attacks to suppress them. Roar, 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 woo, 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 crackle. And Lin noticed to his shock that they were still barely able to hold on at the beginning, but as they absorbed more and more of the boundless reincarnation flames, they were utterly unable to withstand the attacks of the flames, and they started to let out shrill cries repeatedly. The boundless reincarnation fire was like a huge river that crazily rushed into the whirlpool that Lin had released. Within the sea of vital energy, the flames of reincarnation burned Kirin and the other pets to death. Then, Kirin and the other pets were revived by the special properties of the sea of vital energy before being burned to death by the flames of reincarnation again. Resurrection and death, death and resurrection. Resurrection and death, death and resurrection. And Lin didn't know whether the boundless reincarnation flame could reincarnate on its own, but he knew that the boundless reincarnation flame had allowed Kirin and his other pets to experience the true cycle of life and death. Little pets, like little white tiger and little black tortoise that had just entered the Chi Sea, were already in tears. Why was the sea of energy so scary? No one had told them before. Mama, it was so scary. I want to go home. And Lin's heart ached as he looked at the pets in the sea of vital energy. Then, he continued to devour the flames of reincarnation flame. I'll have to trouble them for now. Once I save their mama, I'll save the disaster in the sea of energy. And Lin released his divine sense and roughly assessed the situation of the reincarnation flame. The results were very satisfactory. Its volume had already shrunk by 1%. This meant that the flames of reincarnation flame had been isolated by a special power after entering his sea of vital energy. As a result, it was unable to reincarnate. With this in mind, Lin excitedly increased his rate of devouring. He opened his mouth wide and devoured the boundless flames of reincarnation flame at a rate that could fill an entire Pacific Ocean. 10 minutes later, burp, erg, and Lin suddenly felt nauseous and began to vomit violently. The flames of reincarnation flame filled his sea of vital energy, burning everything in its path. Even the liquefied vital energy in his sea of vital energy was evaporated into gas. When a liquid becomes a gas, it will expand. Right now, and Lin felt like his sea of vital energy was expanding to the point where it hurt. If he continued to devour the flames of reincarnation flame like this, his sea of vital energy would explode in less than a minute. No, he was going to die if he continued like this. And Lin looked at the sun to find that it had only shrunk by 8%. There was no way he could devour all of it. What do I do? What do I do? I can't eat anymore. And Lin was burning with anxiety. Was there a way to completely devour the flames of reincarnation flame without taking up too much space in his sea of vital energy? A thought suddenly flashed through in Lin's mind, and he thought of a way. If he hadn't been forced into a corner, he wouldn't have even thought of this method. He was a little conflicted about this power, and he was a little conflicted about this identity. However, he didn't have time to think too much now. He had to give it a try. And Lin's heart suddenly transformed into a vast expanse of nothingness. Any mighty figure at the return to void pinnacle stage possessed their own power of the divine Tao. Didn't Lin have one? He did too. His power of the divine Tao was darkness. Pure darkness began to appear beneath and Lin's feet. The darkness slowly proliferated and sucked in everything around it. It was very peaceful. There was no sound. There was no violent energy. Everything was proceeding in complete silence. It was impossible to describe what kind of darkness this was. The flames of reincarnation flame possessed the ability to reset everything and enter the cycle of reincarnation and rebirth. However, in the face of this power of darkness, it was completely unable to put up any resistance. It was sucked in and completely disappeared. True darkness represented absolute nothingness. It represented that apart from darkness, no other element was allowed to exist. Everything that was devoured by darkness would be transformed into nothingness. And Lin was shocked to discover that when he unleashed his divine Tao of darkness, the speed at which the flames of reincarnation flame was devoured was over 100 times faster than when he used his power of engulfment. Furthermore, the flames of reincarnation flame completely disappeared after being sucked into the darkness. Even Lin didn't know where the flames had gone. It was as if even their existence had been wiped away. What terrifying power! And Lin was shocked by his own power. He knew that his divine Tao of darkness had an engulfment effect, but he didn't expect it to be so terrifying. Even the flames of reincarnation flame were unable to withstand it. At this moment, a star outside the reincarnation sun suddenly opened its eyes. This is impossible. The star was astonished. The flames of reincarnation are rapidly decreasing. What's going on? What did he do? The reincarnation sun was shrinking at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. One had to realize that every star was hundreds or even thousands of times larger than a planet. What did it mean for the reincarnation sun to shrink so rapidly, devouring a planet in one gulp? What a joke. Chapter 1929. This powerful being that had transformed into a sun suddenly became extremely panicked. The fact that it was able to call the prideful Great Empress Vermilion Bird by her name, and the Great Empress Vermilion Bird didn't show any signs of disgust, was a testament to its status. It had lived for countless years, and it had seen countless bizarre things. However, it had never encountered a being that could swallow a sun so quickly. Furthermore, this wasn't an ordinary sun. It was the reincarnation sun that possessed the power of reincarnation. As it thought about this, the reincarnation sun's body became thinner. At the same time, the light it exuded also began to dim. It was as if it were about to die of old age after expending all energy. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun was truly panicking. It saw the darkness within the reincarnation sun. It felt as if it wanted to swallow everything, as if it wanted to reduce everything to nothingness. A boundless sense of danger welled up in its heart. Too mysterious, too powerful. This human's power was far beyond the powerful being's imagination. How had the reincarnation sun's flames been swallowed? Where did the flames go, and how did they disappear? It really couldn't understand. Even Lin didn't understand what was going on, let alone Little White. Although Lin had grasped the true intent of darkness and attained the paramount law of darkness, he still had very little understanding of true darkness. If he tried to delve deeper into it, he would feel as if his entire being would be engulfed by darkness. It was as if his entire existence was about to be erased. This was also why he was subconsciously afraid of using this power. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun was already slowly moving away from the reincarnation sun. To be honest, if any of the 8 stars outside of the Vermilion Bird planet were going to die, it wouldn't have thought that the reincarnation sun was going to die. After all, this was determined by the unique properties of the stars. Reincarnation represented indestructibility. Even if a god of creation stage, super mighty being, smashed it for hundreds of years, the reincarnation sun would definitely not feel any pain. But now, the neighboring reincarnation sun brothers looked like they were about to die. The powerful being that had transformed into a sun didn't dare to be its neighbor anymore. It immediately ran far away, afraid that the power of darkness would contaminate it. The reincarnation sun became smaller and smaller. Finally, a crackling sound rang out. Pure darkness pierced through the boundlessly dazzling sun. The reincarnation sun that had burned for countless years was finally engulfed by darkness. Absolute darkness appeared in the universe, as if it would continue to spread outwards. The big shot that had turned into a sun felt that the surrounding light, the 8 great stars, and the billions of galaxies seemed to have disappeared in an instant. What entered its eyes was an endless void. This scene made its hair stand on end. It had never heard of such pure dark force before. Fortunately, the darkness disappeared in the next second. Only the white-robed figure was still floating in the universe. He was very, very small, but the big boss sun could not ignore his existence at all. His entire body seemed to be shining brighter than the sun. "It's over. Vermilion Bird, you've Astra's king kicked an iron plate," the sun god muttered. Meanwhile, on the immortal Vermilion Star, the battle between Su Xiaolan and the great Empress Vermilion Bird continued. The azure holy light that contained the azure dragon's origin power clashed violently with the scarlet holy light that contained the Vermilion Bird's origin power. The terrifying energy impact caused the giant planet, which had been reinforced by layers of laws, to become dilapidated. Half of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages' bodies were paralyzed by the aftershocks of the battle, and they reluctantly retreated from the battlefield. No matter how stubborn they had no choice but to admit that Su Xiaolan was powerful. The great Empress Vermilion Bird had already released her true form. With a flap of her wings, she transformed into a vermilion bird that was several million feet tall. Su Xiaolan also stopped being a human. Her body perfectly fused with the projection of the Azure Dragon Holy Birth. With her body as the core and the power of the Azure Dragon as her flesh and blood, she controlled the star-coiling dragon and tore at the Vermilion Bird before her. Their battle gradually moved away from the immortal Vermilion Star. This was the great Empress Vermilion Bird's intention. Su Xiaolan also did not want the immortal Vermilion Star to be destroyed. There were too many living beings on this planet who could not escape in time. Their battle would destroy this planet. Thus, their battle moved from the immortal Vermilion Star to the boundless outer space. Their battle had already reached the realm of returning to one's natural state. Like wild beasts, they madly rammed into each other. Moreover, they used their claws to tear and their mouths to bite. From time to time, they would unleash some powerful and extravagant divine abilities. However, all of this was in preparation for taking a bite out of the other party. The Vermilion Bird's power of flames was the strongest. As Su Xiaolan's azure dragon body pierced through the Vermilion Bird's domain of flames, her incredibly tough scales had already been charred black. However, she did not cower in the slightest. Instead, she rushed toward the Vermilion Bird and bit down. The Vermilion Bird wanted to flap her wings and escape. However, the Azure Dragon's tail had already circled around the Vermilion Bird's back and sealed off her escape route. Bam! The Azure Dragon's tail was like a huge palm that ruthlessly slapped the Vermilion Bird's back. The Vermilion Bird screamed in fear, and her gigantic body involuntarily plummeted forward. The Azure Dragon's gigantic mouth was already upon her, and it ruthlessly bit down on the Vermilion Bird's neck. Like countless divine weapons, the Azure Dragon's densely packed teeth pierced into the Vermilion Bird's flesh, causing blood to spurt out. Chirp! The Vermilion Bird screamed in anguish as she frantically flapped her wings. Suddenly, a boundless amount of high-temperature flames erupted from her body. These flames spread in all directions, and her entire body transformed into an extremely hot crimson sun. Su Xiaolan's bite on the vermilion bird's body felt like she was biting a sun. It was extremely uncomfortable. However, she did not let go. Instead, she continued to bite down on the vermilion bird's neck. Furthermore, she continuously sucked the vermilion bird's blood through her teeth that had pierced into the vermilion bird's flesh. Every mouthful of blood was extremely nutritious, and it was as if she had consumed a high-rank immortal pill. Su Xiaolan, tonk, 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 tonk. She continued to gulp down mouthfuls of blood. Chirp! The great Empress Vermilion Bird screamed in anguish. Her wings crossed as she furiously smacked Su Xiaolan's head. However, Su Xiaolan continued to bite down on the vermilion bird's neck and gulp down mouthfuls of blood. The vermilion bird was going to absorb her blood essence and bloodline. Then she would suck the vermilion bird's blood dry. The neck was one of the vermilion bird's fatal weaknesses. How could Su Xiaolan possibly let go? This was the moment where victory and defeat would be decided. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was forced into a desperate situation, and a ruthless expression appeared on her face. "Nan Li Vermilion Bird Flame," she yelled. Vermilion Bird, Nan Li's body suddenly trembled. Then, he let out a wail of anguish. The bloodline in his body burned furiously as it was stripped away from his body. Then, it soared into the sky and gathered beside the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The other 5 Vermilion Bird sages all revealed expressions of shock and horror. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was extracting Vermilion Bird, Nan Li's bloodline. Vermilion Bird, Nan Li would die if she did that. Immediately afterward, however, a nightmare struck. Yu Luo, Vermilion Bird Flame. Bing Xin, Vermilion Bird Flame. Tian Xian, Vermilion Bird Flame. Illusory Gold, Vermilion Bird Flame. Tai Jing, Vermilion Bird Flame. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's voice was like a supreme, divine decree. None of the Vermilion Birds could disobey her will. The bloodlines of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages started to burn involuntarily. They wailed in anguish, but they were still unable to stop their bloodlines from being stripped away. Then, they charged toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Soon, 6 different bloodlines started to burn around the great Empress Vermilion Bird's body. They quickly transformed and condensed into 6 different holy rank spears. Each spear was over 1,000,000 feet long, and they pierced through heaven and earth. Not only did they contain the terrifying power of flames, but they also contained the 6 Vermilion Bird Sages' bloodlines, as well as the Tao realm that the 6 Vermilion Bird Sages had comprehended in their entire lives. Even the Vermilion Bird itself didn't know just how terrifying all of this combined with the power of the Vermilion Bird's essence was. After all, this was an attack that the 6 Vermilion Bird Sages had sacrificed. Su Xiaolan, it's all over. Bloodline Forbidden Technique, Universe-Shattering Spear. The great Empress Vermilion Bird laughed sinisterly. Then, the 6 holy spears trembled slightly. Then, they simultaneously descended towards Su Xiaolan. Chapter 1930. The 6 spears pierced toward the Azure Dragon, who was biting down on the great Empress Vermilion Bird's neck. The power of each holy flame spear could easily slice apart a gigantic planet. Su Xiaolan had no way of dodging, and her body was pierced by the 6 spears in the blink of an eye. A searing pain erupted throughout her entire body, causing her to tremble. Her mouth, which was biting down on the Vermilion Bird's neck, also opened in pain. The space-shattering spear didn't just possess extreme sharpness. Extremely powerful flames were also its unique characteristic. The explosive sharpness began to ravage the Azure Dragon's body. The spears that had pierced through the Azure Dragon's body began to release their power of flames. The piercing was only the prelude. The explosion was the main point. This was a violent, tsunami-like destruction. The Nanli fire stripped away everything. The Yu Luo fire corroded flesh and blood. The Bing Xian fire froze one's body. The Tianjin fire incinerated everything. The Huanjin fire penetrated one's entire body, and the Taijing fire scorched one's consciousness. In an instant, Su Xiaolan felt 6 different types of extreme pain. The power of each type of flame was terrifying enough to kill a god of creation. As the holy flame spears exploded, they incessantly pushed the azure dragon's gigantic body forward, leaving behind 6 rainbow-like trails of flames in the boundless outer space. It was a magnificent sight. In the end, the 6 holy flame spears ruthlessly nailed the gigantic azure dragon into the immortal vermilion star. The immortal vermilion star suffered another destructive blow. Not only did the azure dragon crash into it, but the 6 holy flame spears also pierced through the azure dragon's body. From afar, it looked as if a huge red ball was being crushed by the azure dragon and pierced through by the 6 brightly colored flame spears. Ow! The azure dragon roared in pain and indignation. The vermilion bird looked down at the nailed azure dragon with a cold expression. It's over. Now it's time to eat. When the 6 vermilion bird sages saw that their bloodlines could actually unleash such a powerful power that even the legendary azure dragon was nailed to the immortal vermilion star, their resentment turned into fanaticism. Is this my true power? It's amazing. It can actually suppress the azure dragon. Su Xiaolan, do you see this? My power is piercing through your flesh and torturing your body. You are nothing in my eyes. Wah! Thank you, Great Empress Vermilion Bird. You've shown me how powerful I can become. I'll give up everything for Great Empress Vermilion Bird. Everything is for Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The 6 vermilion bird sages have been forced to extract their bloodlines. They were clearly on the brink of death, yet they still turned into bootlickers and loudly expressed their intentions. It doesn't matter how the goddess treats me. I'm willing to eat instant noodles for the goddess. Everything the goddess did was right. Even if it wasn't right, it was still worth forgiving. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird slowly descended. Waves of heat swept over, and half of the immortal vermilion star was scorched red. Her every move would cause a natural disaster. But now, she couldn't care less. There was only one thing she wanted to do, and that was to kill Su Xiaolan and eat Su Xiaolan. Boom! The gigantic azure dragon's body couldn't bear the pressure. It disintegrated into specks of azure light. The coiling star dragon completely disappeared. Along with it, the power of the azure dragon tribe, the projection of the azure dragon holy birth, and the star power of the dragon origin star also disappeared. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird was momentarily dazed. Then, she looked at Su Xiaolan, who was riddled with wounds, and a vibrant smile appeared on her face. In the end, it's still a borrowed power. The most dazzling and powerful moment of your life has already become history. The current you probably can't even defeat the 6 vermilion bird sages, right? The Great Empress Vermilion Bird quickly shrank and transformed back into a voluptuous woman in a crimson feather dress. Step by step, she walked toward the woman in the azure dress, whose aura was becoming weaker and weaker. I've paid an unimaginable price for this battle. Even eating everything of yours won't be enough to make up for it. Although there was a smile on the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's face, her eyes were extremely cold. Tell me, how should I thank you? Su Xiaolan crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. The 6 holy flame spears were still embedded in the immortal vermilion star, and they were like 6 pillars of fire that rose from the boundless earth, exuding a boundless flame might. The only good thing about the azure dragon's body being destroyed was that it had successfully avoided being burned by the holy flame spears. You don't need to thank me, because mine Lin will thank you properly. Su Xiaolan wiped away the blood from the corners of her mouth, and a beautiful smile appeared on her flawless face. Lin, the Great Empress Vermilion Bird couldn't help but burst into laughter. That arrogant idiot was burned to death by the reincarnation sun a long time ago. Do you really think he can escape and save you? As she spoke, she spat out a crimson bead. The vermilion bird heart essence had appeared once again. However, this time, there was an extremely conspicuous crack on its flawless surface. Even with the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's current abilities, she couldn't even repair this crack on the surface of the vermilion bird heart essence. From this, one could imagine just how pitiful the vermilion bird heart essence was. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was also in despair. She wanted to perfectly extract Su Xiaolan's bloodline and fuse it into her own body. She had to release the vermilion bird heart essence to absorb it. However, she never would have thought that she would be ambushed twice in a row, and this caused her to be even more severely injured. However, everything was over now. It was finally going to end. Not only am I going to extract your vermilion bird bloodline and extract your fortune, but I'm also going to squeeze your flesh and blood dry. Moreover, I'm going to imprison your divine sense and burn it for billions of years before devouring you. The great Empress Vermilion Bird leaped towards Su Xiaolan with a cold smile on her face. Even if you want to die, I won't let you have an easy death. Just like how I dealt with Lin, I'll imprison you in the reincarnation sun and make your divine sense suffer the pain of being incessantly burned by the reincarnation sun. You won't be able to die even if you beg for it. This is the consequence of opposing me. Su Xiaolan wasn't afraid or flustered in the slightest. Instead, she was extremely happy. She smiled and said, "You keep talking about the reincarnation sun. Haven't you noticed that one of the stars in the sky is missing?" The great Empress Vermilion Bird's footsteps faltered, and she raised her head in a daze. Then, she slowly opened her mouth. The battle just now had been too intense, so she didn't have time to pay attention to the changes in her surroundings. Now that Su Xiaolan mentioned it, she immediately discovered an extremely unbelievable scene. How is this possible? Where's the reincarnation sun? Impossible. This is impossible. Everything that was happening before her eyes was beyond her understanding. Just as her mind was in turmoil and her mind was about to fall into absolute shock and confusion, and Lin, who had secretly used the Void Body Mantra, suddenly appeared near the great Empress Vermilion Bird. The power of the 5 elements erupted, and the evil-slaying sword ruthlessly slashed toward the Vermilion Bird heart essence. By the time the great Empress Vermilion Bird reacted, it was already too late. "No!" The great Empress Vermilion Bird screamed. Crack boom! The Vermilion Bird heart essence was ruthlessly sliced into 2 by the sharp sword. Chapter 1931. The nightmare reappeared. The great Empress Vermilion Bird had originally thought that the probability of the Vermilion Bird heart essence being severed twice was already close to 0. Never would she have imagined that it would happen a 3rd time. What did the Vermilion Bird heart essence do wrong? Why do you keep hacking at it? And Lin spun his sword and was about to hack it again. The great Empress Vermilion Bird, who had just come to her senses, let out a clear cry and made a grabbing motion in the air. The 2 halves of the Vermilion Bird heart essence were summoned, and they instantly flashed over to the female's mouth. The female opened her red lips and swallowed the bead again. Her movements couldn't be any more practiced. Then, the great Empress Vermilion Bird started vomiting blood. The Vermilion Bird heart essence had been severed for the 3rd time, and the terrifying backlash almost killed her. How could Lin let go of such a rare opportunity? He immediately wielded his evil-slaying sword and unleashed his 5 elemental body and heavenly god powers. Then, he pounced toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird and unleashed a flurry of attacks. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was about to go crazy. She vomited blood as she defended against Lin's attacks. She was in an extremely sorry state, and there was still an expression of disbelief on her face. Why? Why were you able to escape? What did you do to my reincarnation son? In the blink of an eye, the female's snow-white skin had been slashed in a dozen or so places. However, she was still unwilling to give up. The scene before her eyes had far exceeded her understanding. What did I do? I ate it, and Lin replied indifferently. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's pupils contracted. I'm impossible. And Lin's sword intent swept through the air, and the power of the 5 elemental bodies bombarded the female's body. He sneered. Apart from saying that it's impossible, what else can you say? The great Empress Vermilion Bird vomited another mouthful of blood at Lin. And Lin swung his sword, and the 2 halves of blood suddenly erupted with a dazzling crimson light. Boom! The blood exploded, and the extreme Vermilion Bird origin power instantly incinerated everything in the surroundings. Every drop of the vermilion bird's blood contained energy that even Tao integration stage super mighty figures couldn't withstand. One could imagine how powerful the explosion of this mouthful of blood was. The great Empress Vermilion Bird didn't want to attack Lin by vomiting blood. After all, this was a technique that dealt a heavy blow to the enemy and a heavy blow to herself. However, she was currently in a state of panic and anxiety. In addition to the backlash from her heart essence, she was originally going to vomit blood, so she decided to make use of the blood. Rip! A streak of black light sliced through the vermilion bird origin power. Lin's body was charred black as he rushed out from the explosion. He continued to swing his sword toward the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird's eyelids twitched, and a rare hint of retreat appeared in her heart. She had suffered repeated setbacks, and her confidence in this battle had slowly fallen to the bottom. Su Xiaolan had reached the Tao integration stage and had even become the guardian deity of the Azure Dragon tribe. This was already incomprehensible to her. Now, Lin had actually destroyed the Samsara sun. This was even more beyond her understanding. Every time she tried to spit out her vermilion bird heart essence, it would be ambushed. She was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. But when she thought about it carefully, only an extremely powerful enemy would be able to cause her so many accidents. In other words, she had completely underestimated the strength of these two people. Right now, her condition was already extremely poor. She couldn't even use the power of the vermilion bird heart essence. As proud as she was, she couldn't guarantee that another unbearable accident wouldn't occur when she killed these two people. Temporary retreat? This thought finally surfaced in the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's mind. In terms of fleeing speed, the Vermilion Bird was definitely the fastest in the realm of stars. In fact, she was even faster than the other three holy beasts. If she wanted to flee, apart from Pangu, no one could catch up to her. But was she really going to flee? The Great Empress Vermilion Bird's body trembled uncontrollably as she struggled internally. Fleeing meant that she was no match for these enemies. Even if there were countless reasons, it would still mean that she was afraid of these enemies. These enemies had humiliated her. Her extreme pride wouldn't allow her to do such a thing. Universe-shattering true spears, the Great Empress Vermilion Bird suddenly roared in anger. The 6 heaven-shattering holy spears stabbed into the immortal Vermilion Star were pulled out again. Under the command of the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's will, they rapidly shrunk and condensed. From their original size of 10 million feet, they shrunk to 1,000,000 times their original size. Then, they became thin and long spears that were only 10 feet long. Extremely compressed energy and extremely compressed might cause the energy density of each spear to become terrifyingly high. In fact, the surrounding void even formed a collapsing vortex of destruction. It was as if the entire world was going to be destroyed. Go! The Great Empress Vermilion Bird quickly retreated. With a wave of her hand, the 6 terrifying spears, which carried with them the might to tear apart the universe, stabbed toward the nearby Lin. Lin furiously slashed his sword toward one of the spears. Boom! Lin felt a boundless power that made his heart palpitate. What he slashed wasn't a spear. Rather, it was a divine tool that could easily tear apart the world. The web between Lin's thumb and forefinger split open, and he almost lost his grip on his sword. His body was quickly knocked back by the immense power contained in the spear. The holy flame contained within the spear also spread along the evil-slaying sword to his entire body. Then, it quickly started to burn him. And Lin howled in pain from the scorching heat. He had to admit that the spears before him were truly terrifying. They had the power to easily wound him. At this moment, the other 5 spears had already whizzed toward him. An indescribable rage burned in Lin's heart as he sensed the terrifying, piercing power of the spears and the pain caused by the flames. Was Su Xiaolan tortured by these 6 terrifying spears? When he rushed over, he saw the scene of the Azure Dragon being pierced by the 6 holy spears. He saw Su Xiaolan screaming in anguish as she was nailed to the immortal vermilion star and burned by the 6 holy flames. Now that he had personally experienced the might of the spears, he was even more furious. It was also at this moment that he saw the great Empress Vermilion Bird flap her wings. Then, she transformed into a streak of red light and fled into the distance. This scene caused Lin's expression to change drastically. The great Empress Vermilion Bird is actually trying to escape. Now, they were already enemies. If he allowed the great Empress Vermilion Bird to successfully escape and recuperate from her injuries, she would definitely become an extremely terrifying enemy. I can't let her escape. I can't let her escape no matter what price I have to pay. This was the only thought in Lin's mind at this moment. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was indeed fleeing. The holy beast's intense desire to live had defeated her pride, and she had chosen a strategic retreat. However, she had already sworn a vow in her heart. When the two of them met again, she would do everything in her power to exact vengeance on them, no matter the cost. In fact, she was even willing to give up massive benefits and join forces with the 4 holy beasts to hunt them down. She was going to capture the 2 of them alive and then torture them endlessly. Only then could she wash away the humiliation she had suffered today. Just as she was thinking this, the great Empress Vermilion Bird's feathers suddenly stood on end, and a boundless sense of danger enveloped her entire body. She was being stared at by something terrifying. Chapter 1932. Just what kind of feeling was this? Just who could bring such a feeling to the Vermilion Bird? Boundless darkness, boundless depth. She was extremely close to death. It was as if her existence was going to be erased from this world in the next instant. Darkness blotted out the sky. The scorching earth also turned into darkness where nothing could be seen. There was no heat, no light, no matter, and no space. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was still frantically fleeing. Her fiery wings, which radiated with the Vermilion Bird origin power and holy light, looked as if they would be engulfed by the darkness in the next instant. She turned her head with great difficulty and saw a scene that both terrified and enthralled her. Behind her was a man who wore a black divine robe and wielded his evil-slaying sword. With a single slash of his sword, he obliterated the 6 holy spears. His eyes were a pair of black and white fish, and they were like the eyes of a deity. His aura wasn't very powerful, but it was as if he had transcended beyond this world. He was extremely ethereal and unfathomable. The great Empress Vermilion Bird was enthralled by this man's aura. This was an aura that she yearned for. However, she was also terrified at the same time. This was because the man had already pointed his sword at her, and she had nowhere to run. Everything around her was pitch black. Wherever the darkness was, the man's attack range would be. She didn't know what to do to escape this boundless darkness. This was in Lin's high-rank war god mystic technique, Dark Immortal Transformation. After Lin obliterated the 6 holy spears, his sword continued to slash toward the great Empress Vermilion Bird. 3 seconds of true man. Every moment was extremely precious. Die! And Lin roared in rage as he slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the fleeing great Empress Vermilion Bird. The great Empress Vermilion Bird knew that she couldn't escape, so she instantly turned around and transformed into her true form. Her wings spanned over 10 million feet, and a sinister expression appeared on her face. Copious amounts of blood burst forth from her body, transforming into boundless blood flames capable of incinerating the universe. I'm going to kill you. Only blood flames. If the great Empress Vermilion Bird ignited her bloodline, she could materialize a space-shattering true spear that could pierce through the Azure Dragon. However, this time, the great Empress Vermilion Bird ignited her own bloodline. How many times more powerful would it be than the space-shattering true spear? Never fight a god of creation to the death. This was something that all gods of creation were well aware of. The other party could choose to escape if they were no match for him. However, if he forced the other party into a desperate situation and the other party fought back with all his might, it was very likely that he would be consigned to eternal damnation. But now, and Lin had forced a god of creation with a holy birth to fight to the death. The threat of a disaster like this was countless times more terrifying than if a god of creation were to be hounded to death. The Hongli blood flame was over 100 times hotter than the holy vermilion flame that the vermilion bird had unleashed in the past. Not only was the Hongli blood flame indestructible, but it was also able to proliferate endlessly. Even if the darkness was boundless, the Hongli blood flame would still be able to expand without end. This light was brighter than planet Suzaku and could pierce through the darkness. This was an attack that the vermilion bird had sacrificed its path and ignited its bloodline. This was an attack that could kill a god of creation stage, Cultivator. Rumble. The blood-red flames collided with Lin's sword technique. The surging blood flames instantly swallowed the black sword light and then surged madly towards Lin. The great Empress Vermilion Bird spread her wings, and she laughed with resentment and satisfaction. "Ha ha! Good. Burn him for me." She had only just finished speaking when the crimson flames before her were inexplicably sliced in half. The great Empress Vermilion Bird's mouth gaped open in shock. Before she could figure out what was going on, everything around her had sunk into absolute darkness. She couldn't see anything, and she couldn't sense anything. Even the pain only lasted for an instant. Then everything completely disappeared. She couldn't even sense her own existence. This was even more terrifying than death. Disappear? No! The vermilion bird screamed in horror. Boundless terror started to spread through her entire body, and her expression changed drastically as she flapped her wings continuously. However, it was all too late. Her enormous body, which seemed to cover the sky, had already split into the deepest darkness from the middle. Then, the darkness spread and engulfed her chest, engulfed her wings, engulfed her bare feet, engulfed her head, and finally, even her consciousness was engulfed. Eternal and boundless darkness was her only home. The darkness dissipated. The vermilion bird, which was so gigantic that it could engulf an entire planet, had already completely disappeared. Silence reigned over the boundless heaven and earth. Waves of heat surged, and only a white-robed figure stood silently. His body seemed extremely frail and fragile, but he still gripped his sword tightly in his hand. The entire Vermilion Bird star system witnessed the scene of a boundless and majestic vermilion bird being engulfed by darkness before completely disappearing. They were shocked and bewildered. On the immortal vermilion star, the 6 vermilion bird sages were shaking their heads in agony and disbelief. Where's the great Empress Vermilion Bird? Is she dead? No, the great Empress Vermilion Bird won't die. And Lin, you shameless bastard. Hurry up and release our great Empress Vermilion Bird. If you have the guts, then fight fair and square. Don't always play dirty tricks. The mighty great Empress Vermilion Bird is invincible. No one can break her legend. We will wait here for her return. The 6 vermilion bird sages were still hooting. Even though they were already in an extremely pitiful state, they still had to open their mouths. Whoosh! A rain of blood fell from the sky. Every drop of blood contained an extremely rich vermilion bird Tao realm. Phenomena of a god of creation falling began to appear. The 6 vermilion bird sages had been slapped in the face. Their eyes were red and swollen, and tears streamed down their faces as they stared at this unimaginable scene. All of the living beings in the vermilion bird territory began to realize that the vermilion bird had fallen. Even though the phenomena had already appeared, they still couldn't believe that this was reality. A rain of blood fell from every planet in the vermilion bird star system. The phenomena began to spread from the vermilion bird star system to the rest of the star systems. This time, the scope of the phenomena was even larger than what Lin had seen last time. It covered hundreds of millions of planets in the southern region of the realm of stars. A rain of blood fell from all of the planets. All of the living beings on the planets were suddenly enlightened. One of the 4 holy beasts, the vermilion bird, had already fallen. Following this, they were filled with uncontrollable grief. The fall of the vermilion bird was a super major event that shocked the entire realm of stars. Furthermore, The phenomena brought about by its fall weren't just limited to the southern region of the realm of stars. Instead, they quickly spread to the entire boundless realm of stars. The vermilion bird took control of the southern region, and the skies of all the planets in the southern region were dyed blood red. Regardless of whether it was day or night, it was as if the skies in the southern region had been dyed red with blood. All of the living beings in the universe were struck by a boundless sense of grief. This wasn't the fall of a god of creation. Instead, it was the fall of a holy god of creation. The entire universe was grieving. Of course, the most grief-stricken were the living beings of the vermilion bird tribe. All of the living beings in the vermilion bird star system were sobbing. The source of their bloodline had been severed, and the being they revered the most had fallen. This was such a heavy blow that many of the vermilion bird tribe living beings chose to commit suicide on the spot. They were the proudest tribe, and the bloodline that flowed through their bodies was the source of their pride. Furthermore, the great Empress Vermilion Bird was the goal that they pursued their entire lives. Now, even their ultimate goal had fallen. One could imagine just how heavy a blow this was to their Tao hearts. At least 1/10 of the vermilion bird tribe living beings in the vermilion bird star system had chosen to commit suicide. The phenomena of the great Tao of heaven and earth that signified the death of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure also began to appear. However, Enlin didn't have the leisure to pay attention to these things. He looked toward the direction where the great Empress Vermilion Bird had disappeared. Chapter 1933. At the location where the great Empress Vermilion Bird had disappeared, a crimson bead slowly floated in the air. That's right, the great Empress Vermilion Bird had died, but her vermilion bird heart essence remained. The vermilion bird heart essence was in tatters, but it managed to withstand Enlin's dark immortal strike. The vermilion bird heart essence was the only thing that existed in the entire universe. It was something that all living beings yearned for. It was a supreme treasure that could drive even gods of creation crazy. It was also a prerequisite for gods of creation to advance to the holy birth. Even though Enlin didn't have any vermilion bird bloodline, he was still extremely tempted. Enlin took a step forward. Then, an extreme sense of dizziness and weakness instantly engulfed his entire body. His body swayed slightly, and he was about to fall backward. The dark, immortal transformation had depleted all of his energy. Right now, he couldn't even fly toward the vermilion bird heart essence. Enlin, are you all right? A crisp and sweet voice traveled over from behind him. Enlin fell into a soft and warm embrace. Enlin shook his head and urged, I'm fine. Xiaolan, hurry and take the vermilion bird heart essence. It's a good thing. Su Xiaolan looked up at the crimson bead in the air, and her sealed bloodline began to throb uncontrollably. Even Enlin couldn't resist it. So Su Xiaolan's bloodline was extremely compatible with the vermilion bird heart essence. This was a fatal temptation. Xiaolan, this is a rare opportunity. Hurry and refine it. Enlin urged excitedly. Can I really do it? Su Xiaolan was extremely uneasy. She had just experienced a fierce battle, and she was currently in a weakened state. Furthermore, she had been tricked by the great Empress Vermilion Bird using the vermilion bird heart essence. So she was extremely wary of the vermilion bird heart essence. Furthermore, she had sliced the vermilion bird heart essence in half before. Who knew if the vermilion bird heart essence would hold a grudge? Believe in yourself. You can do it. Enlin was still encouraging him. When Su Xiaolan heard Enlin's words, she immediately undid the seal on the vermilion bird bloodline in her body and released the complete and pure vermilion bird bloodline. Rumble. The pure aura of the vermilion bird bloodline began to spread. The vermilion bird heart essence in the sky suddenly began to tremble violently. It was already an ownerless object, and it could choose an existence that was compatible with it as its successor. The vermilion bird bloodline aura released by Su Xiaolan was exactly what it liked. Su Xiaolan was a little confused. Speaking of which, how did he refine the vermilion bird heart essence? The method that the great Empress Vermilion Bird had taught her was clearly not the correct way to refine the vermilion bird heart essence. Thus, the question was, how was she supposed to refine the vermilion bird heart essence? Just when Su Xiaolan was at a loss. Whoosh! The vermilion bird heart essence suddenly tore through space and hurtled towards Su Xiaolan. Su Xiaolan was given a fright. She hadn't summoned the vermilion bird heart essence, but the vermilion bird heart essence was charging toward her. Did it have to be so bold? At the very least, it had to have the pride of a supreme vermilion bird. Su Xiaolan was still very nervous. She didn't know whether the vermilion bird heart essence was charging toward her out of kindness or malice. What if the vermilion bird heart essence also wanted to harm her? As the vermilion bird heart essence drew closer and closer, she inexplicably began to read a lot of emotions from the crimson bead before her. These were emotions that only possessors of the purest bloodline had the right to read. Vermilion bird heart essence. Boss. Want me? Su Xiaolan. The crimson bead grew anxious upon seeing the woman's cold expression, and it continued to release its emotions. Vermilion bird heart essence. I'm severely injured right now, and I don't have an owner. I urgently need the nourishment of an owner's power. In the entire vermilion bird tribe, only you have the right to possess me. Furthermore, your bloodline is comparable to the great Empress Vermilion Bird's perfect successor. So, hurry up and accept me. Swallow me and transfer me to your heart. Use your heart's blood to refine me, and you'll be able to fuse with me. Su Xiaolan's eyes lit up slightly. She was just struggling to figure out how to refine the vermilion bird heart essence, and it was voluntarily telling her, "But I'm only at the Tao integration pinnacle stage right now. Can I really refine you?" Su Xiaolan asked hesitantly. "Of course you can. You don't necessarily have to be at the God of Creation stage to obtain a holy birth. It's just that we usually look down on living beings that aren't even at the God of Creation stage. However, you've changed my mind." The vermilion bird heart essence replied with excitement. As it spoke, its body suddenly showed signs of cracking again. It instantly panicked again, and it flew around Su Xiaolan while releasing its emotions. "There's no time to hesitate. Hurry up and refine me. If you don't absorb me, I'm going to die soon." Su Xiaolan raised her eyebrows with a smile. The vermilion bird heart essence is an eternal and undying treasure. You're still alive even after the great Empress Vermilion Bird perished. And now you're telling me that you're going to die? Who are you trying to fool? Vermilion bird heart essence. All right, I was exaggerating a little. The crimson bead trembled lightly as it tried to express its emotions with great difficulty. This is equivalent to a human possessing an undying ability. However, his body is sliced in half at the waist, and his blood splatters all over the ground. He crawls on the ground, bleeding as he crawls. He's in extreme pain, and his life essence is constantly being drained away. Although he has an undying hack, it's no different from being on the brink of death. Su Xiaolan stroked her chin and nodded. That's a very apt analogy. The vermilion bird heart essence was on the verge of tears. Is this the time to talk about this? Can't you see that I'm crawling around in front of you while dragging my bloody body that's been sliced in half? Hurry up and save me. Let my body heal. All right. Su Xiaolan opened her dainty mouth and swallowed the vermilion bird heart essence. Then, she silently transferred it to her heart to refine it. However, she hadn't even refined it for a minute before rich vermilion bird essential power erupted from the vermilion bird heart essence. Moreover, an extremely holy and ethereal aura fused into her entire body. Boom! A crimson pillar of light soared into the sky. Su Xiaolan once again became the center of the storm, sweeping up winds and clouds in a radius of over 10,000 kilometers. A peculiar bloodline aura proliferated and resonated with the great Tao of heaven and earth. The 6 vermilion bird sages were all dumbstruck upon seeing this. The vermilion bird heart essence was swallowed by Su Xiaolan. She even received the acknowledgement of the vermilion bird heart essence. No, stop her. We can't let the vermilion bird heart essence fall into the hands of despicable humans. The 6 vermilion bird sages yelled as they writhed on the ground. However, their bloodlines were completely depleted, so they couldn't even approach Su Xiaolan. However, just because they couldn't do it didn't mean that other powerful beings couldn't do it. 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds poked their heads out of the clouds. Their eyes were like stars, and they looked down greedily at the 2 humans on the ground. The 2 of them have just battled the great Empress vermilion bird, so they're at their weakest right now. That male can't even stand. As for that female, she's lost the power of the Azure Dragon, and she's also been severely wounded. Right now, she's busy refining the vermilion bird heart essence, so she can't spare any attention. Her combat prowess is also close to 0. This is our last chance, and also our best chance. Chirp! Kill them. Avenge the great Empress vermilion bird. The 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds roared as they tore through the thick layer of clouds. With a terrifying might, they ferociously pounced toward Enlin and Su Xiaolan. There was one thing they didn't say. The vermilion bird heart essence was theirs. Chapter 1934. If it were Enlin and Su Xiaolan at their peak condition, these 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds wouldn't dare to charge toward the 2 humans even if they were given 10,000 times the courage they had. However, things were different now. Enlin and Su Xiaolan didn't even have critical health left. Instead, they only had a sliver of health left. They had a total of 10,000 health left, but they only had 1 health left now. Furthermore, they had been silenced and weakened. How could they resist the urge to kill them? What a joke. They were going to be the last hit kings. For great Empress Vermilion Bird, for the honor of the Vermilion Bird tribe. Die, die, die. The flames of the 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds made the entire sky change color. Su Xiaolan's body shuddered, and an expression of remorse appeared on her face. She was just about to forcibly stop the vermilion bird heart essence refinement process when a warm hand gently patted her head. Don't get distracted. I'm here, and Lin said with a serious expression. Su Xiaolan was slightly dazed. You even needed someone to support you when you were walking, and you had to kneel down even when a soul formation stage bird appeared. How were you going to defend yourself against 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds? However, a sense of security welled up in her heart at the sight of the white-robed man standing in front of her with a sword in his hand. Even though Enlin was unreliable at times, he was still very reliable in times of need. Su Xiaolan discarded all distracting thoughts and placed her trust in this extremely feeble man as she continued to refine the vermilion bird heart essence. The 6 vermilion bird sages all yelled with elation at the sight of the 3 Tao integration stage vermilion birds. Good job. You're going to be the greatest heroes of our vermilion bird tribe. Charge. Eat those 2 despicable humans alive. Not only were the 6 vermilion bird sages extremely excited, but the remaining vermilion bird tribe living beings on the immortal vermilion star, as well as the other vermilion bird tribe powerful beings wandering in outer space, also turned their gazes toward the 3 super mighty figures. It was as if these 3 were the hope of their tribe. And Lin held 3 first-grade immortal pills in his mouth as he pulled out a high-rank immortal sword from his storage ring. Ha! In this state, you still want to use your sword to kill us? Stop struggling. Do you think the amount of primordial chi you're using now is comparable to the amount of primordial chi a deity transformation rookie uses? Give up resisting, and we'll let you die more comfortably. When the 3 vermilion birds saw Enlin's reaction, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Enlin raised his head and smiled. Do I need to use my vital energy to deal with you guys? Bang! The high-grade immortal artifact suddenly exploded. Countless fragments that looked like white ice crystals exploded with an extremely terrifying sword intent. Sword Burial. Heavenly Sea Extreme Ice. The fragmented sword blades of the peak immortal level shot into the sky, transforming into streaks of clear and transparent extreme, chill heavenly swords. Their sword intents had reached the pinnacle, and their sword might pierce through the sky. Wherever the heavenly sword passed, the void froze, and all things fell silent. No, how is this possible? The 3 vermilion birds' expressions changed drastically as all of their feathers stood on end. They unleashed scorching flames toward Enlin and Su Xiaolan like heavenly flames, only to be pulverized by the extreme, chill heavenly swords. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The heavenly swords continued onward and tore the bodies of the three Tao integration stage super mighty figures into shreds. They didn't even get a chance to cry out before they were torn to shreds before being frozen into chunks of frozen flesh that crashed heavily to the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Heaven and earth wailed with grief as Tao integration stage super mighty figures fell. Everything had happened far too quickly. It was so fast that the elated and excited smiles on the faces of some of the Vermilion bird tribe living beings were still frozen in time, creating an extremely comical sight to behold. 3 Tao integration stage super mighty figures had been insta-killed. The 6 Vermilion bird sages were slapped in the face again, and their mouths gaped open as they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. It was as if they had lost all of their faith. And Lin had killed 3 Tao integration stage super mighty figures with a single strike. What happened to him running out of tricks? What happened to him being forced into a corner? Why did he look so feeble? How could he be killed? All of the Vermilion bird tribe powerful beings were astonished. In their eyes, and Lin did indeed only have 1 drop of health left. However, in their eyes, this battle had become, and Lin only had 1 drop of health left, and the 3 Tao integration stage Vermilion birds felt like they had a huge advantage. The 3 Tao integration stage Vermilion birds charged toward Lin. Miss, and Lin had only 1 drop of health left. 3 kills. Who could survive that? All those who dare to attack Xiaolan must die. And Lin positioned himself in front of Su Xiaolan as he spoke in a cold voice. His voice wasn't very loud, but all of the powerful Vermilion bird tribe powerful beings shuddered upon hearing this. A chill ran down their spines as they were intimidated by his aura. No one dared to speak again. The chaotic energy was still wreaking havoc on the dilapidated planet. And Lin's white robe flapped violently in the turbulent energy, and his body swayed slightly, as if he was about to be overwhelmed by the turbulent energy. However, none of the Vermilion bird tribe powerful beings dared to attack Lin again. And Lin and his sword had held off the Vermilion bird tribe army in his most feeble state. Su Xiaolan's eyes were filled with infatuation and fascination, and Lin was super mesmerizing in this state. He was clearly in an extremely feeble state, and he could only unleash less than 1/10,000th of his full power. However, he was far more mesmerizing than he had been in the past. This was the image of an extremely feeble man standing in front of her with a resolute determination to hold off the Vermilion bird tribe army. This scene would forever be engraved into Su Xiaolan's heart. And Lin was so exceptional. If she didn't work harder, how could she be worthy of Lin? With this in mind, Su Xiaolan's Tao heart became even more resolute, and her Vermilion bird heart essence cultivation seemed to have reached a new level as her entire body began to transform. As for Lin, he was feeling extremely good, and all of the pores on his body had opened up. And Lin looked around at the vast heaven and earth with an indifferent expression, but he was feeling extremely good in his heart. Even if I'm a cripple who can't use my power, I can still crush all of you. Are you all bad *SS? Are you all scared? The Dark Immortal transformation was Lin's most powerful trump card, but the crippled state he would be in after using it was the biggest flaw of this technique. And Lin came up with a series of countermeasures in response to this flaw. He swallowed high-rank immortal pills to quickly replenish his energy, and he used the sword burial technique of the 6 strikes of the war god as a self-defense technique. The most unique thing about the sword burial technique was that even if he didn't use his own power, he could still unleash unparalleled power just by sacrificing the essence of the immortal tool and using his sword intent alone. The only downside was that it was extremely expensive. A high-rank immortal tool cost over 10 million spirit stones. However, the one thing that Lin didn't lack the most was money. It was exactly because of this that the sword burial technique became his most powerful self-defense technique. All he had to do was buy money, and Lin still had several hundred of these immortal swords in his inventory. So what was there to panic about? Setting aside the fact that Lin was just bluffing, Even if all of the Vermilion Bird Tribe powerful beings pounced on him at once, and Lin wouldn't panic in the slightest. Instead, he would be able to show them just how terrifying a kryptonite tycoon was. Chapter 1935. The Vermilion Bird powerful beings that Lin was looking forward to didn't come to pass. Even though he was very feeble now, the image of him insta-killing a Tao integration stage 3 super mighty figure was still fresh in the minds of all the Vermilion Bird powerful beings. The Vermilion Bird heart essence was indeed very tempting, but they had to be alive to enjoy it. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages were already beginning to doubt their lives. As one of the 4 top secluded clans of the Starfield, its strength was extremely powerful and its heritage was extremely deep. But now, it was being suppressed by 2 humans to the point where it couldn't even lift its head, and Lin stood in front of Su Xiaolan. No matter how feeble his aura was, no matter how feeble he looked, none of the Vermilion Bird Tribe powerful beings dared to take a single step forward. He was a top-tier power on his own. He stood there alone like an insurmountable mountain. The Vermilion Bird Tribe powerful beings were suddenly struck by a sense of despair and powerlessness. How could there be such a person in this world? And Lin was clearly very feeble, and he was clearly putting on an expression that said, "I'm very weak. Come and CK me up." But the Vermilion Bird Tribe powerful beings were still very fearful and hesitant. The Vermilion Bird Tribe had twice as many super mighty figures of the Azure Dragon Tribe. But why did the Guardian Goddess of the Azure Dragon Tribe, by Shui, say that the Vermilion Bird Tribe would definitely be able to gather fewer Tao integration stage super mighty figures than the Azure Dragon Tribe? This sentence was finally expressed vividly in this scene. The Vermilion Bird Tribe was indeed very proud, but compared to their pride, they cherished their lives more. A series of tiny red divine patterns began to appear on Su Xiaolan's snowy white skin. These red divine patterns even extended to her face, but they were not messy and disorderly. Instead, they were extremely orderly, as if they were conforming to some kind of great Tao. Her eyeshadow became a bright red, and her delicate ears were tinged with a hint of red. Her lips were extremely vibrant and eye-catching, and one couldn't help but want to kiss them. Lin looked behind him, and he was immediately stunned by her beauty. This Xiaolan was simply too dazzling, more beautiful than all of the divine flowers in the world. Just as Lin was lost in thought, a pair of white wings suddenly unfurled from Su Xiaolan's back. Unlike the Vermilion Bird's blood-red wings, Su Xiaolan's wings were more holy and flawless. It was as if all the pureness and beauty in the world had been gathered on her wings. Wah! Her wings suddenly folded and wrapped around her body, forming a white egg shape. This, and Lin was stunned. Is this ancestral awakening? Then he began to worry. Even if you want to revert, you don't have to turn into an egg. Xiaolan, you're not a bird. I don't want to be scared when the egg hatches and a little bird comes out. The white egg shook, as if protesting against Lin's words. The Vermilion Bird's aura was still spreading, and it was becoming more and more intense. It had already radiated to hundreds of planets in the Vermilion Bird star system, and every Vermilion Bird living being could clearly sense it. Demon, this is a hatching demon egg. Kill. We have to kill this demon in the cradle. If we don't kill this demon, our Vermilion Bird tribe will definitely be wiped out. When that time comes, we won't be far from extinction. The 6 Vermilion Bird sages had tears streaming down their faces as they rallied the powerful beings of the Vermilion Bird tribe. Lin was a little speechless as he looked at the idiots in the distance. He still hadn't figured out how to deal with them. He would have to wait for Su Xiaolan to complete her inheritance first. Both sides were still in a deadlock. In reality, the longer this deadlock dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for Lin. He had almost completely absorbed the effects of the 3 first-grade immortal pills, and the insane regenerative abilities of his body of the war god were beginning to appear. Even without the sword burial technique, he could still battle against Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Not taking into account anything else, just the fact that the 6 Vermilion Bird sages had all ignited their bloodlines was a piece of cake for him. At this moment, The entire realm of stars was shaken by the fall of the vermilion bird. On the dragon origin star, Bai Shui and Qiyu looked at each other. No way. Su Xiaolan and Enlin went to the vermilion bird realm, and Su Xiaolan even used her guardian deity power for the only time. Could it be that they fought the vermilion bird? Qiyu's flesh crawled with fear. I think so. What's most unbelievable to me is, did they win? Did they defeat the vermilion bird who had ruled over the vermilion bird tribe for countless years? Bai Shui felt like this was an extremely far-fetched speculation, but it was undeniable that this was the most plausible explanation. Even though I've already thought very highly of them, I still underestimated them. Thankfully, our Azure Dragon tribe has a good temper and treats them well. Qiyu patted his chest with lingering fear in his heart. The Black Dragon, who was in seclusion to refine the Azure Dragon heart essence, couldn't help but open his eyes. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that my previous host would be so powerful? If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't be able to believe it. He even killed the vermilion bird. I wonder if he'll be able to inherit the vermilion bird's holy birth. That little girl seems to possess an extremely pure vermilion bird bloodline. Could it be her? A series of thoughts flashed through the Black Dragon's mind, but he was still focused on refining the Azure Dragon heart essence. The most important thing now was to return to the holy birth. However, he had already made up his mind. After he regained his holy birth, he was going to build a good relationship with Enlin and Su Xiaolan. Both of them were extremely fortunate, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to befriend them as soon as possible. All of the gods of creation in the boundless realm of stars opened their eyes before turning toward the southern region of the realm of stars. All of them were paying close attention to this massive fall. This was definitely the most astonishing event that had ever taken place in the realm of stars in the past tens of thousands of years. Some of the mighty beings were even unable to repress the excitement in their hearts as they made their way toward the teleportation spell formation and the vermilion bird's territory. It was very likely that the vermilion bird heart essence had already been obtained by someone, but they were still unable to repress their curiosity and hurried toward the vermilion bird's territory to see just which mighty being had obtained the vermilion bird heart essence. Among the gods of creation, heavenly monarch Bei Luo was most likely an exception. After witnessing the fall of the vermilion bird, he was even more certain of his guess. This was definitely Enlin's doing. Enlin had to have unleashed some kind of terrifying trump card to be able to kill the vermilion bird. Thank God he had escaped in time. Otherwise, he would have definitely suffered the same fate as the vermilion bird. He couldn't help but feel a little smug about his wise decision. Enlin was so terrifying. The 4-9 Immortal Sect was so terrifying. An extremely mighty transcendental power gradually took shape in his mind. Heavenly monarch Bei Luo was feeling elated, and he was even more determined to live in seclusion. The most important thing now was to find a good place to conceal his identity and reappear after this storm had passed. In the southern region of the heavens, all of the living beings on the various planets looked up at the blood-stained sky with shock, curiosity, or grief on their faces. All of them knew how serious this matter was, but they were more curious about why the vermilion bird had fallen and which mighty being had slain her. On the immortal vermilion star, Enlin protected the white egg and waited for Su Xiaolan to reappear. He knew that he was most likely going to face the pressure of not just the powerful beings of the vermilion bird realm, but the entire realm of stars. However, he wasn't going to back down. He was going to protect Xiaolan at all times, until Xiaolan's rebirth. Chapter 1936. At the extreme north of the realm of stars, there was the largest ocean in the entire realm of stars. Boundless seawater stretched across the starry sky with no end in sight, and it reflected the dazzling galaxy of stars. This seawater was not normal water. Instead, it was the purest water of extreme. An extremely gargantuan body emerged from the ocean. The carapace on its back was as large as an entire continent, and its head was like a gargantuan snake as it looked toward the south. Its eyes were inky black, as if they could engulf the entire sky. It It was one of the four most powerful beings in the star field who possessed a sage position, the black tortoise sacred beast that shook the entire northern star field. I thought my Xianwu heart essence was unlucky enough to be blown up for no reason, but who would have thought that the vermilion bird would be even more unlucky than me? Not only did it lose its vermilion bird heart essence, it even lost its life. Xianwu shook its head as countless complex and profound golden veined patterns appeared on its shell. Let me divine for a moment to determine just who will be able to obtain the vermilion bird heart essence. Moments later, Xianwu's body suddenly began to tremble. What kind of divination is this? A being that transcends heaven and earth. Xianwu discovered that it was unable to see through the being that had slain the vermilion bird. How could a being that existed within heaven and earth see a being that existed outside of heaven and earth? It became even more curious about that being. It was said that curiosity killed the cat. However, a tortoise wasn't a cat. Xianwu was extremely bad *SS, so it didn't mind being a little curious. So be it. I'll use my holy birth to divine for a moment. The holy birth was a being that transcended beyond heaven and earth. It was eternal and unique, and it had existed even before heaven and earth had been created. Even if heaven and earth were to be destroyed, it would still be able to survive. Xianwu immediately began to use its holy birth to divine for a moment. However, the result of the divination left it completely dumbstruck. This, the child of the universe, his partner. In the westernmost region of the realm of stars, a little white tiger pounced onto Yang Yuan and licked him with all its might. Oh, dear Yang, let me tell you some exciting news. According to our informants, the vermilion bird's death was caused by 2 humans. To think that the human race would have such a powerful being. Are they going to rise to become one of the 3 major tribes of the realm of stars? 2 humans. Yang Yuan was slightly taken aback upon hearing this. A man and a woman? Oh, my Yang, you're so smart. It really is a man and a woman, so I'll reward you with a lick. Little white tiger licked Yang Yuan's face again. Yang Yuan couldn't care less about his disgust as waves of shock surged through his heart. No way. Enlin and Su Xiaolan killed Vermilion Bird? Was he going to ascend to heaven? In the southernmost region of the star region, Vermilion Bird star system, a dark fissure that spanned thousands of kilometers appeared. Soon after, a giant whale-like astral beast swam out of the crack. Although it was huge, if one didn't focus on it with their spiritual sense, they wouldn't notice it at all. It was as if it had a halo around it that even ordinary living beings could ignore. An indistinct and profound aura surged in the void, and with just a slight wave of its tail, which was glowing with a deep blue light, it could leap hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The star race was the race that was most proficient in flying through space. This massive whale was the leader of the star tribe, the Dark River Immortal Whale. It was a god of creation's stage mighty figure, and it was the first powerful being to arrive in the Vermilion Bird star system. In the realm of stars, it was the fastest being to travel through space. The Dark River Immortal Whale's favorite thing to do was to join in on the fun. At the same time, it was also the #1 broadcaster of the realm of stars universe, and it would broadcast any major event that happened. For an earth-shattering event like the fall of the Vermilion Bird, it had to travel in person in order to obtain first-hand information. Oh, I've made an earth-shattering discovery. There's a recording divine tool on top of the whale's head, and it began to record the surroundings of the Vermilion Bird star system. One of the 9 stars of the Vermilion Bird star system has been destroyed. The whale's body trembled with excitement. There are remnants of the Vermilion Bird's heaven-scorching power and the Azure Dragon tribe's verdant wood power lingering in the air. So the Azure Dragon tribe has something to do with this. The Dark River Immortal Whale wriggled its massive body as it swam through the Vermilion Bird's territory, recording first-hand information with excitement. Look, what's that? What huge fish. No, wait. That's Senior Dark River Immortal Whale. My God, it's here. All of the Vermilion Bird tribe living beings let loose cries of surprise at the sight of such a huge whale? Is a god of creation trying to take advantage of the situation by coming here? No. Senior Dark River Immortal Whale is a good fish filled with a sense of justice. There's no need for us to worry. Senior Dark River Immortal Whale, please help us kill those two heinous humans. Some of the vermilion bird living beings had even placed their hopes on a foreign whale. However, most of the vermilion birds remained silent. Their pride prevented them from saying such words, but they were also hoping that the Dark River Immortal Whale would swallow those two detestable humans in one gulp. The Dark River Immortal Whale paid no heed to the vermilion bird tribe living beings. Instead, it swam through the air and recorded everything it saw with excitement. The Dark River Immortal Whale exclaimed in excitement, "What an intense battle! What powerful energy fluctuations!" Space was torn apart, and chaos was wreaking havoc. Azure and red energy lingered in the air for a very long time. Just from looking at it, I can tell just how intense the battle was. Oh, so this is the immortal vermilion star of the vermilion bird tribe? How did it end up like this? If it weren't for the power of laws, it would probably have exploded several hundred times already. The Dark River Immortal Whale exclaimed in amazement at the sight of the tattered immortal vermilion star. It then caught sight of the man standing silently on the ground, as well as the woman who had been reduced to a white eggshell, and its eyes abruptly contracted. Those two must be the top-rate powerful beings who slayed the vermilion bird, right? What an unfamiliar aura, what an unfamiliar existence. To think that they're humans, aren't the most powerful beings in the human race only at the Tao integration pinnacle stage? How could a human kill a vermilion bird? No, even a god of creation stage god of creation wouldn't be able to kill a vermilion bird. Where did these freaks come from? There's a very good chance that they're not humans from this world. The Dark River Immortal Whale was the most knowledgeable god of creation, stage god of creation, and it immediately came to a conclusion. He's already so feeble after that battle. The Dark River Immortal Whale narrowed its eyes as it looked at the white-robed man in the distance. Has the woman behind him received the approval of the vermilion bird heart essence? Is she in the process of refinement? How tempting. The Dark River Immortal Whale was a little tempted. It was a fish with no desires and no desires, but the vermilion bird heart essence was right before its eyes, and it was extremely tempted. It had no choice. This was the most valuable treasure in the realm of stars, and even it was no exception. Should it do anything? Should it do anything? It was the fastest god of creation, stage god of creation. It could definitely do something, then escape with the vermilion bird heart essence. Should it do it or not? The Dark River Immortal Whale fell into a dilemma. Right at this moment, the white-robed man in the distance also caught sight of it, and a smile appeared on his face. Anyone who dares to attack Xiaolan will die. Chapter 1937. It was a very lackluster statement. It was like a bedridden old man coughing and trembling as he told a bandit in a feeble voice, "Anyone who dares to take my money must die." A normal bandit would most likely have slashed him with his saber without any hesitation. However, the Dark River Immortal Whale hesitated. It knew that this old man had killed the vermilion bird in the past. Did this white-robed man have any other trump cards? Also, what was his background? The vermilion bird heart essence was indeed a good treasure, but it didn't want to die here for it. Ha ha ha. Don't worry, I'm a reporter from the realm of stars, and I'm just here to see what's going on. I'm a lover of peace. The Dark River Immortal Whale's body quickly shrank down to become an adorable little whale that was only around a meter in length. It swam toward Lin in an extremely friendly and approachable manner. And Lin slashed his evil-slaying sword through the air, creating a sword projection in a radius of over a kilometer. All those who cross this line will be killed without exception. A god of creation stage reporter? Who was he trying to fool? Air. The Dark River Immortal Whale's body faltered. It looked like this man was very cautious. He didn't seem to be afraid of battle, but he was extremely cautious, which indicated that he was currently in a very bad condition. Should it do this or not? The Dark River Immortal Whale began to hesitate again. The Dark River Immortal Whale hesitated momentarily before asking, I really am a reporter. Can I interview you? And Lin carefully assessed the condition of his body, and it was still quite difficult for him to clash with a god of creation stage being, so he nodded. Sure, I'll accept the interview. The Dark River Immortal Whale nodded with elation before pulling out a recording crystal. Hello, everyone. I'm your little whale. I'm currently at the scene of the vermilion bird's death, and I'm preparing to interview the two mysterious powerful beings who killed the vermilion bird. Stay tuned, everyone. And Lin, what the hell? Why was this thing so proficient? Was it really a reporter? Hello. The Dark River Immortal Whale greeted Lin. Hello. And Lin replied. He knew that the interview had already begun. The Dark River Immortal Whale was very excited. May I ask who you are, fellow Taoist? Where did you come from, and where are you going? And Lin put his palms together and said in a calm voice, Benefactor Little Whale, this humble monk is Tang Bazong. I've come from the great Tang of the eastern lands, and I've come to the western paradise to obtain scriptures. So it's fellow Taoist Tang Bazong. The Dark River Immortal Whale had never heard of Tang Bazong, but that didn't mean it was very enthusiastic. It knew that after today, Tang Bazang's name would spread throughout the entire realm of stars. What is the Tang of the East? What is the Western Paradise? Could this be the territory of the White Tiger Holy Beast? The Dark River Immortal Whale's expression became even more respectful upon hearing this. A mysterious smile appeared on Lin's face. I can't tell you that. All you need to know is that I'm doing something that can bring salvation to the entire universe. The Dark River Immortal Whale shuddered upon hearing this. What a grand dream. It seemed that the other party was a kind existence, a good faction. Then why did you come into conflict with the holy beast Vermilion Bird? The Dark River Immortal Whale asked. The Vermilion Bird tried to kill my Tao partner, so I had no choice but to kill her, and Lin replied in a nonchalant manner. The Dark River Immortal Whale drew a sharp intake of breath. This was a werewolf. It turned to look at the woman who had transformed into a white vermilion bird egg. You worked so hard to kill the vermilion bird, only for your Tao partner to obtain the inheritance of the vermilion bird heart essence. What do you think of this? And Lin blinked. What else? I have to look with my heart. The Dark River Immortal Whale's mouth gaped open upon hearing this. Then what do you plan to do with the rest of the vermilion bird tribe living beings? The Dark River Immortal Whale asked. That'll depend on what my Tao partner thinks, and Lin replied with a smile. The Dark River Immortal Whale turned to the egg with a curious expression. What could an egg possibly think? By the time it thought of something, all of the vermilion bird tribe living beings would have already run away. No, why weren't they running away? The Dark River Immortal Whale was confused. However, it soon realized what was going on. When Su Xiaolan refined the vermilion bird heart essence, the vermilion bird aura that she released made all of the vermilion bird tribe living beings extremely reluctant to leave this star system. This was a feeling of warmth. This was a feeling of home. This was light. Moths flying into a flame. The vermilion bird tribe living beings wouldn't fly into a flame, but they pursued the essence of their bloodline. This was actually the advanced version of moths flying into a flame. The aura being released by Su Xiaolan was like a flame to all of the vermilion bird tribe living beings. Is this the aura of the vermilion bird? I feel like it's different from before. In the past, it was regal with extreme pride, but now it's holy and warm like the sun. It doesn't seem to look down on all living beings as if they were mere ants. The Dark River Immortal Whale commented. A smile appeared on Lin's face upon hearing this. Of course, this is the power of the vermilion bird. He looked at the egg in front of him with a doting expression, revealing the benevolent concern of an old father, as if the egg contained all hope. The vermilion bird tribe living beings were hoping that the Dark River Immortal Whale would teach these two detestable humans a lesson. But what did they see? They are actually having a friendly and pleasant interview and conversation. What the hell was going on? It was a god of creation, yet it didn't even have the courage to take advantage of the situation. The powerful beings of the vermilion bird tribe were all exasperated. Unfortunately, They couldn't influence the dark river immortal whale's thoughts and could only look on from afar. The 6 vermilion bird blasters were completely immobilized, and they were struck by a deep sense of powerlessness. Their hopes were reignited again and again, only to be reduced to despair in the end. And Lin had already become the epitome of despair. Not long after that, another burst of spatial fluctuations erupted from the vermilion bird star system. A semi-transparent, 7-colored being that resembled a Kirin suddenly tore through space and galloped through the air like a horse. The terrifying soul power that it exuded made all of the nearby vermilion bird tribe living beings feel as if they were struck by a sense of asphyxiation. That's Heavenly King Dong Chun of the Spirit Tribe. A vermilion bird tribe, powerful being exclaimed. And Lin had also noticed the extremely powerful being in the distance, and his brows furrowed slightly. Another god of creation had descended. He was one of the 4 heavenly monarchs of the Spirit Tribe, and he was on par with Heavenly Monarch Shi Ling and Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo, Heavenly Monarch Dongchun. Riot! There was another explosion that tore through the void. Ha ha! I've always wanted to go to the vermilion bird's nest. What a pity! I won't be able to sleep with such a delicious beauty like the great Empress Vermilion Bird for the rest of my life. What a pity! What a pity! An 8-winged monster with spikes all over its body and a sinister head resembling that of a western dragon crashed through a spatial rift and descended upon the vermilion bird star system with a boundless aura. Its 8 wings were all different. Some were snow white and pure. Some were densely covered in skulls. Some were overflowing with vitality. Some were covered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. When they stretched out, they were like paintings that traversed the starry sky, and they surged with boundlessly profound origin energy. The god of creation of the primordial tribe, the extreme Tao Holy Falcon. The vermilion bird tribe living beings were beginning to panic. Things had already progressed far beyond their wildest imaginations. Normally, when the vermilion bird was present, even gods of creation weren't allowed to enter the vermilion bird's territory. However, one god of creation after another had arrived at the vermilion bird star system without an invitation. The vermilion bird's territory had become extremely turbulent. Chapter 1938. It had just tested out in Lin, and the result was that he was going to be even more difficult to deal with than it had imagined. And Lin's expression became a little more grave as he looked at the gods of creation, but he still stood silently in front of Su Xiaolan. Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo had been enraged by the destruction of the soulless star, and he had then battled the extreme Tao Monkey Monarch. Everyone knew that he had defeated the extreme Tao Monkey Monarch. There was no other reason than the fact that he was facing 3 gods of creation now. After being baptized by the super divine might technique, the 3 gods of creation's wariness toward Lin had increased to a whole new level. Even the previously arrogant extreme Tao Holy Eagle was now silent. This was the difference. It could make one's opponent misjudge one's power. The Dark River Immortal Whale didn't enter the range of Lin's sword. Instead, it slowly retreated, but it had no intention of retreating, as if it was making space for the 2 gods of creation. Mr. Tang Bazong, thank you for accepting the interview. The interview is now over. The Dark River Immortal Whale waved its glowing tail with a friendly smile on its face. The extreme Tao Holy Falcon descended with black winds swirling around it, as if it were trying to make all living beings kneel down. The 2 gods of creation were quickly flying toward the immortal vermilion star. The Dark River Immortal Whale was just conversing with Lin when an urge suddenly welled up in its heart, but it immediately repressed this urge. It knew that its best opportunity to strike had already passed. Ha ha! Mr. Tang Bazong, you've wronged me. I've already told you that I'm a reporter and a pacifist. I would never do something like that. The extreme Tao Holy Falcon's legs gave out from under it, and it was just about to kneel down, but its 8 wings managed to stay firmly on the ground, thereby avoiding an extremely embarrassing scenario. Was the answer finally revealed now? The super divine might technique had expended a lot of the power of Lin's consciousness, but it was more effective than he had imagined. At the very least, the three gods of creation didn't dare to attack him anymore. And Lin felt as if a boundless mountain were crushing his entire body. If he were a Tao integration stage, super mighty figure, he would probably be crushed in a mincemeat in an instant. Heavenly Monarch Northstar and the Infernal River Immortal Whale also swayed slightly. Even if they were not targeted, they were still shocked, and their hearts were in turmoil. Gods of creation represented transcendence, and they wielded the most essential power in this world. None of them were to be trifled with. The Dark River Immortal Whale, Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun, and the Extreme Tao Holy Falcon, if the three of them were to attack him at once. Even Lin at his peak condition would be in a state of panic, let alone the half-recovered Lin. From Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo's reaction, it could be seen that not only was this man terrifyingly powerful, he also had an extremely terrifying background. Otherwise, Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo wouldn't have run away so easily. The biggest advantage of the Super God's Might technique was that it could expand one's aura infinitely. For example, the extreme Tao Holy Eagle might be able to display an awesome aura just by having an awesome strength. However, Lin had the power to unleash more than 10% of his power with the Super Godly Might technique. Super Divine Might technique, activate. Boom! A mysterious, powerful being had beaten the most prideful Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo to the point of seclusion. Furthermore, Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo had immediately taken all of his valuables with him before disappearing without a trace. He had clearly abandoned the spirit tribe and fled on his own. He had already swallowed a dozen or so immortal pills, and his phenomenal regenerative abilities from his phenomenal success stage body of the war god had healed around 50% of his strength, consciousness, and injuries. For the first time, he was struck by how insignificant he was. He had even abandoned the spirit tribe. How could there be such a mighty being in this world? The extreme Tao Holy Falcon flapped its wings at an extremely fast speed, sweeping up gusts of black winds that instantly pulverized everything within a radius of over 500 kilometers around it into invisible dust. Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun swallowed nervously. He had just tortured Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo, and now he had killed the vermilion bird in just a few days. Was he really going to make enemies out of a werewolf like this? What kind of powerful being could unleash such a terrifying aura just from his aura alone? Who could strike such fear into Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo's heart? Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun shot a cold glance at the extreme Tao Holy Falcon. Holy Falcon, you don't have the right to interfere in this matter. The vermilion bird's death has already severely impacted the stability of the entire realm of stars. This matter is under the jurisdiction of our Peacemaker Alliance, so please step back. However, the pressure he was feeling now was countless times greater than when he was facing all of the vermilion bird tribe powerful beings in his weakened state. Tang Bazong was bad *SS. The peerless might of the war god crushed all things. However, Heavenly Monarch Dong Chen's heart was in turmoil. Space congealed, and the earth caved in. You were the one who killed the vermilion bird? Heavenly Monarch Dong Chen's footsteps faltered, and an unparalleled spiritual might instantly enshrouded the entire immortal vermilion star, striking fear into the hearts of countless vermilion bird living beings. They raised their heads to discover an extremely mighty rainbow Kirin descending from the sky. And Lin clasped his hands behind his back, and his back was as straight as a pine tree as he looked at the rainbow Kirin with a smile. Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun, I've heard a lot about you. Speaking of the 4 heavenly monarchs of the spirit tribe, I've even met Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo once before. Golden ripples proliferated throughout heaven and earth, instantly vanquishing the extreme Tao Holy Falcon's aura. And Lin spoke with an indifferent expression. His soulless star was destroyed, and he vented his anger on me. I was very unhappy, so I taught him a lesson. I hope he won't take offense, and I hope you can convey my apologies to him. Furthermore, he had an astonishing battle record, so the extreme Tao Holy Falcon didn't dare to doubt him. However, he still had a chance. Haha, your SH*TTY alliance can only scare return to Void and Tao integration stage mighty figures, but don't put on airs in front of me. I can go wherever I want to go. The extreme Tao Holy Falcon chortled with glee. So this is the human? He doesn't look very powerful. The 8-winged dragon-headed monster chortled with glee as an extremely powerful aura crashed down upon Enlin. He couldn't afford to mess with him. There are other gods of creation who are faster than me? Its expression shifted slightly at the sight of the extremely pure rainbow Kirin, as well as the little whale before Enlin. Heavenly Monarch Dongchun and the Dark River Immortal Whale? Interesting, but you haven't obtained the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence yet, have you? However, Heavenly Monarch Dongchun was aware of another secret, which was that Heavenly Monarch Bei Luo had gone to the Azure Dragon tribe to wage a battle, only to suffer a crushing defeat. Heavenly Monarch Bei Chen's expression darkened upon seeing this. The Peacemaker Alliance was an organization that maintained peace in the realm of stars, and it had 2 gods of creation as its overseer. It was considered one of the most powerful organizations in the realm of stars. Normally, it was possible for gods of creation to give them some face, but it was very difficult to restrict the actions of a god of creation. Enlin's body didn't move in the slightest, and his eyes became pure golden in color. Enlin looked at the little whale over a kilometer away with a smile on his face. Now that you've said your piece, do you want to make a move? The extreme Tao Holy Falcon, which bore the brunt of the attack, felt as if it had seen an invincible god looking down at it with an indifferent expression. Chapter 1939. Enlin simply stood there without uttering any threatening words, but the 3 gods of creation didn't dare to do anything. All of the Vermilion Bird Tribe powerful beings were dumbstruck. They were gods of creation. They were the most powerful beings in the entire realm of stars. 3 gods of creation combined didn't dare to attack, just because Enlin was standing in their way. Did they have to be so cowardly? Enlin didn't provoke them any further after saying what needed to be said. What he lacked the most right now was time, so his opponent's hesitation was beneficial to him. The extreme Tao Holy Falcon, Heavenly Monarch Dongchun, and the Dark River Immortal Whale communicated with one another through their eyes. The Dark River Immortal Whale blinked its large eyes. Tang Bazong is very powerful. After all, he's able to slay the Vermilion Bird. No matter how feeble he is, he still has trump cards that can threaten the lives of gods of creation. If we want to defeat Tang Bazong, we have to join forces. Heavenly Monarch Dong Chen's eyes flashed incessantly. Not only is Tang Bazong extremely powerful, but he also has an unfathomable background. If we really do this, we have to be prepared to face the retaliation of the forces behind him. The extreme Tao Holy Falcon flapped its wings. How are we going to split the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence? Are we going to steal it? If we fight with this mentality, the 3 of us together won't be able to defeat Tang Bazong. It was originally the most arrogant one, but after being taught a lesson by Enlin's super divine might technique, it had become the most cowardly one. Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun took a deep breath. We don't have the Vermilion Bird bloodline, so we won't be able to perfectly refine the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence. We can only use it to research how to become a holy birth or to improve our cultivation bases. In that case, we can swear Tao Heart vows that once we obtain the Vermilion Bird Heart Essence, we can take turns to research it for 100 years. Upon hearing this, the other 2 god of creation also nodded silently. It was clear that this proposal had received unanimous approval. Are you ready? It's going to be a vicious battle, and we're going to have to face the retaliation of an extremely terrifying unknown power. We'll die 1,000 deaths for the sake of Tao. The 3 gods of creation finally made up their minds, and they all swore vows as they prepared to launch an all-out attack against Enlin. Enlin's entire body was tense, and he was extremely focused. An unprecedented war was about to break out. Heavenly Monarch Dongchun strode over slowly with a cold and ethereal voice. Tang Bazong, If you leave now or immediately hand over the vermilion bird heart essence, we can spare you. Scram or die. The extreme Tao holy eagle clamored. Tang Bazong, I don't want to get into a conflict with you. If you willingly hand over the vermilion bird heart essence, I can give you a huge sum of money as compensation. How does that sound? The Dark River immortal whale offered. And Lin was quite amused by the three gods of creation's sudden change of expression. Just tell me if you want to take my things. There's no need to beat around the bush. I don't want to fight, but I'm not afraid of fight either. Rumble. The golden wheel appeared behind Lin. The powerful aura of a war god soared into the sky. And Lin slashed his evil-slaying sword through the air, and his sword intent was like a heavenly saber, instantly slicing a bottomless trench into the ground before him. If you want to snatch my things, then prepare to be chopped to death by me. And Lin spoke in a cold and firm voice. The Dark River immortal whale's face convulsed slightly. It didn't doubt the authenticity of Lin's words. But what else could it do? If it wanted to reap huge rewards, it had to take some risks. Kill him. Mr. Tang Bazong, please forgive me. Die. The three gods of creation roared in unison as different essential powers surged toward Lin from all directions, sealing off all of Lin's escape routes. Kacha! Suddenly, a crisp tearing sound rang out. The sound wasn't very loud, but it was clearly audible to all of the gods of creation present. Not only them, but all of the living beings on the entire immortal Vermilion Star, the entire Vermilion Bird Star system, and even the entire southern region of the Realm of Stars heard this ripping sound, as if something was being born. This sound had already transcended beyond the realm of normal sound. Instead, it was being transmitted in the form of Tao, announcing to all living beings in this world, I'm about to be born. Regardless of whether it was the Dark River immortal whale, Heavenly Monarch Dong Chun, or the extreme Tao Holy Falcon, all of them faltered as they stared with wide eyes at the white egg behind Lin. It wasn't that they weren't decisive enough. Instead, they suddenly discovered that there was an extremely terrifying aura that had locked onto them and was warning them, as if it were telling them that if they dared to attack Lin, it would kill them at all costs, and Lin also turned around to stare at the eggshell with ecstasy on his face. Sure enough, a crack had appeared on the surface of the pristine white eggshell, as if something was about to break out. This was a very rich crimson color. This was a crimson color that was even more dazzling than the sun, and it exuded an extremely holy and ethereal aura, as well as a noble and proud aura. The freedom of heaven and earth true intent was also unleashed without any reservation. This feeling of freedom had all of the living beings in the Vermilion Bird territory completely entranced. Crack, crack, crack. More and more cracks appeared on the surface of the eggshell, and within the white shell was the most dazzling crimson color. And Lin's heart was in his throat, and he was both nervous and expectant. In the end, the light from the eggshell made it, so that even Lin couldn't see what was inside. Boom! A loud explosion erupted. Chirp! The ethereal cry of a vermilion bird reverberated throughout the boundless southern star realm. Within the boundless crimson vermilion bird essential power. A vermilion bird so beautiful that all of the living beings couldn't take their eyes off of it broke through the flaming vermilion bird essential power and flew straight into the heavens. In that instant, the entire sky transformed into a boundlessly beautiful painting of the southern star realm. A scene of an immortal realm unfolded before everyone's eyes, and countless birds lived in peace and contentment. At this moment, an extremely breathtaking crimson vermilion bird spread open its wings, which were even more dazzling and beautiful than the rainbow, and flew through the sky like a monarch. All of a sudden, a heavenly tune reverberated through the air, and all of the birds bowed in worship. It wasn't just the immortal Vermilion Star. It wasn't just the Vermilion Bird Star system. Instead, this phenomenon appeared in the entire sky of the realm of stars. The vermilion bird had reappeared. This phenomenon would only appear when the holy birth was successfully inherited. Billions of living beings looked up into the sky at the same time. They stared at the dazzling image that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. All of the vermilion bird tribe living beings were completely entranced, and they forgot how to speak. What a beautiful figure! Wasn't this the pinnacle of their Tao? Their senses told them that this was the most beautiful and worthy of respect. Their bloodline was telling them that this was their queen. Their senses wouldn't lie, and their bodies wouldn't lie either. The vermilion bird before them was the light that they were pursuing. One of the vermilion birds knelt down first. Soon, vast swaths of vermilion birds spread open their wings and knelt to the ground. A series of raucous cries erupted into the heavens. We pay our respects to Great Empress Vermilion Bird. We pay our respects to Great Empress Vermilion Bird. We pay our respects to Great Empress Vermilion Bird. All of the vermilion bird tribe living beings made the same decision at this moment. They used the most direct method to express their emotions. Even the 6 vermilion bird sages knelt down with tears streaming down their faces to welcome their new vermilion bird. Chapter 1940. The vermilion bird's radiance dyed the entire sky a vibrant, vibrant color. Within the southern heaven scroll, countless birds were bowing in worship. Outside the southern heaven scroll, billions of birds knelt at the same time as their respectful cries reverberated through the heavens. The vermilion bird danced in the sky, and all of its feathers were like the most beautiful treasures in this world, making it impossible for onlookers to look away. Its slender and graceful body displayed extreme beauty to the world. Its bright blue eyes were like a mirror in the sky, and it was as if one's soul had been cleansed by it. Even heavenly monarch North Chun and the dark river immortal whale, who didn't have a vermilion bird bloodline, were all mesmerized, let alone the vermilion bird tribe. The beauty of the vermilion bird shook the entire realm of stars. Regardless of whether it was the powerful beings or the billions of ordinary living beings, all of them were struck by an indescribable sense of respect and yearning toward the beautiful figure in the distant sky. In the entire universe, a phenomenon that affected the entire realm of stars would only occur when a holy birth was inherited. After the phenomenon, no one would ever be able to forget the vermilion bird. On the immortal vermilion star, at the place where the phenomenon had erupted, Lin was completely speechless as he looked at the scenes unfolding before his eyes. Too beautiful, indescribably beautiful. He looked at the proud vermilion birds prostrating on the ground, and his heart was filled with a complex mix of emotions. Su Xiaolan was the second person responsible for the death of the great Empress Vermilion Bird, but they were kneeling before Su Xiaolan. Reality proved that these extremely proud vermilion birds were actually loyal to the vermilion bird holy birth rather than a specific being. They only believed in the instinctive thirst in their bloodlines. Su Xiaolan's ascension to the holy birth had made their bloodlines boil and subjugate them. Thus, she was their empress. Even the vermilion bird haters from before were the same. And Lin felt like this was perhaps a good thing. This meant that Su Xiaolan had conquered the entire vermilion bird tribe without sacrificing a single soldier. The entire vermilion bird tribe could be used by her. Just as countless living beings were immersed in this phenomenon, the vermilion bird in the sky turned its eyes toward the dark river immortal whale, heavenly monarch Bei Chun, and the extreme Tao holy falcon. Terrifying holy Tao might swept forth like a tsunami, striking the 3 gods of creation with an extremely fearsome pressure. The vermilion bird territory doesn't welcome outsiders. Scram! The vermilion bird's voice was clear and melodious, and her tone was indisputable. The 3 gods of creation were enraged to hear this. No one in the entire realm of stars dared to speak to them like this. The extreme Tao holy eagle looked at the vermilion bird in the sky, then looked at Lin, who was standing on his sword. It gritted its teeth and said unwillingly, "We've already missed the opportunity to attack. Let's retreat." As it spoke, it unfurled its 8 wings and flapped them. Space surged, and it plunged into the ripples of space, disappearing without a trace. The dark river immortal whale and heavenly monarch Bei Chun exchanged a glance before also choosing to retreat. Dealing with Lin alone was already very risky. Now that there was a new vermilion bird, How are they supposed to fight this battle? Did he really have to gamble with his life? It wasn't worth it. The two powerful figures also disappeared, and Lin's enemies had been forced into retreat by the vermilion bird just like that. It had to be said that Xiaolan was becoming more and more badass. In the past, she would never have dared to tell a god of creation to piss off. Not long after that, the phenomenon in the sky began to dim. The southern sky scroll disappeared. The vermilion bird also transformed into a ball of inexhaustible flames that continued to condense into a crimson streak of light, releasing light and heat that was even more ridiculous than that of the sun before flying toward the center of the shattered eggshell. And Lin made his way toward it with excitement in his eyes. She was finally going to transform back into Xiaolan. He was worried that Su Xiaolan would have to maintain her vermilion bird form. The vermilion bird was very beautiful, but compared to riding the vermilion bird, he preferred hugging Xiaolan. And Lin made his way over to the eggshell, and the blinding light finally disappeared. Xiaolan, congratulations on inheriting the holy birth. And Lin spread open his arms with a smile on his face, waiting for a hug. Wah! A series of crisp, bell-like cries reverberated around his ears. And Lin's smile froze on his face as he looked at the scene at the center of the eggshell. Wah! A delicate little baby was bawling at the center of the eggshell. She had soft, pink skin and features that were so beautiful they were almost unreal. She had soft little hair, and her four limbs were waving in the wind. She looked like a 1-year-old baby girl. And Lin, the little baby girl, oh, this can't be real. And Lin shook his head relentlessly. The little baby girl waved her hands. Wah! And Lin's pupils dilated a little. Why was it that he had waited for Xiaolan to return to his arms, only for the egg to hatch into a little baby? This didn't make any *king sense. However, he soon detected Su Xiaolan's aura from the little baby girl's body. This was a unique aura, and Lin picked up the little baby girl with trembling hands. Xiaolan? Is that you? Xiaolan? Wah! The little baby girl opened her big, bright eyes and patted in Lin's face before giggling like an idiot. Lin, tell me this isn't Xiaolan. However, the surging power of the vermilion bird and the power of the true dragon within the little female infant's body, as well as the ethereal and transcendent aura emanating from her body, as well as her unique scent, were all telling Lin that she was Su Xiaolan, just as Lin was feeling a little lost and on the verge of a mental breakdown. All of the vermilion bird tribe Dao integration stage super mighty figures had gathered behind him, and there were hundreds of thousands of them. Furthermore, all of them possessed powerful auras, clearly indicating that they were the higher-ups of the vermilion bird tribe. And Lin turned around with little Xiaolan in his arms, only to discover that all of the vermilion bird tribe living beings had collapsed to the ground. This was a spectacular sight to behold. It was as if a sea of dazzling feathers were surging through the air. Congratulations on inheriting the holy birth, Great Empress Vermilion Bird. Congratulations on inheriting the holy birth, Great Empress Vermilion Bird. May the Great Empress Vermilion Bird live for eternity. All of the Vermilion Bird higher-ups congratulated her in unison. Xiaolan waved her arms. Wah! We will forever be loyal to the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. A Dao integration stage vermilion bird with a long white beard and a mysterious disc engraved on its back trembled with excitement. Behind him, all of the Dao integration stage vermilion birds yelled in unison. High Priest Hong Wu is right. The Great Empress Vermilion Bird is our light. She is our only legend. We will only be loyal to the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. Immediately afterward, another wave of excited cheers erupted. Little Xiaolan wasn't afraid in the slightest as she listened to the deafening cheers. Instead, she waved her little arms at the hundreds of thousands of vermilion birds before her as she let loose a string of cries. Before she knew it, drool was already flowing from the corners of her lips. Chapter 1941. And Lin remained expressionless as he silently wiped the drool from little Xiaolan's mouth. He didn't know why Su Xiaolan had become like this, nor did he know if she could revert to her original form in the future. The only thing he could do was to accept and love Xiaolan, no matter what she became. With this in mind, Enlin looked at the baby girl in his arms affectionately. Why? The baby girl opened her arms to Enlin, revealing her chubby body to Enlin. Enlin's eyes instantly welled up with tears. F***CK. Are you forcing me to become a pervert? I really can't fall in love with such a tiny baby girl. Although she's little Xiaolan, she's only 1 year old. Are you forcing me to transform from love into fatherly love? And Lin really wanted to vomit blood. What AF * king fate? Everyone else was reborn as a phoenix, so why did her rebirth become rebirth as a nascent soul? What the F * CK was going on? And Lin looked at the countless vermilion birds prostrating on the ground and cheering the great Empress Vermilion Bird. He felt like F * king sh*t. Do you really not mind that the great Empress Vermilion Bird is a human? Furthermore, she's not a normal human. Instead, she's a dumb baby girl who can't even speak. However, the loyalty of the Vermilion Bird tribe was even stronger than Lin had imagined. Once they decided on something, they would follow through with unwavering determination. The most exemplary example was the 6 Vermilion Bird blabbers. Vermilion Bird Uluo was still cheering. Oh, what a beautiful baby! Isn't the great Empress Vermilion Bird's pure and flawless body the embodiment of her pure heart? Vermilion Bird Tianjin replied, doesn't starting from a most ignorant state mean that she's born from the beginning and has to start anew from the beginning? This is the most regal phenomenon, and she is our most regal great Empress Vermilion Bird. Vermilion Bird Bing Xian yelled, Great Empress Vermilion Bird, before you're born, we'll definitely protect you. We won't allow you to come to any harm. Vermilion Bird Nanli spoke in an urgent voice. The great Empress Vermilion Bird is extremely feeble right now. Not only does she need someone to look after her, but she also needs a guardian to look after her and represent her until she matures. I recommend Lauren Lin. What do you think? Vermilion Fantasy Gold wore an expression of approval and fervor. Greetings, Master and Lin. Master and Lin shares a close relationship with Great Empress Vermilion Bird, and he possesses a noble bloodline. He's extremely powerful, and he's also extraordinarily intelligent. He forced the 3 gods of creation into retreat and saved the Vermilion Bird tribe from a dire situation. So he's the most suitable candidate. I concur. The Vermilion Bird of Tai Jing flapped its wings. I agree, and Lin's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Noble bloodline? Save the Vermilion Bird clan from disaster? Have you all forgotten that you've always been against me, saying that my bloodline is despicable, that I'm cunning and treacherous, and that I've committed the most heinous crimes? Are you all F * king good at using anonyms now? High Priest Hong Wu yelled, We abide by the suggestion of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages. Hundreds of thousands of vermilion birds behind him yelled in unison, and their voices reverberated throughout heaven and earth. We abide by the suggestion of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages. We abide by the suggestion of the 6 Vermilion Bird sages. Master and Lin shall be the guardian of the Vermilion Bird tribe. Just like that, and Lin's identity was successfully cleared, and he became the #1 guardian of Great Empress Vermilion Bird. In doing so, he possessed power equivalent to that of Great Empress Vermilion Bird. This world was so magical. This was the only thing that was on Lin's mind at this moment. And Lin had initially wanted to insist that he and Su Xiaolan were Dao partners, but now, all of the Vermilion Bird tribe had chosen Lin as Su Xiaolan's guardian. Wah! A crisp, sweet voice sounded. Immediately afterward, a pair of soft, delicate hands caressed Lin's face. And Lin looked at the adorable little baby girl in his arms, as well as her angelic smile, and all of the distracting thoughts in his mind were completely forgotten. So adorable! 1-year-old Xiaolan was also so adorable, and Lin's heart melted, and he smiled along with Lin. Why do I care so much? All I have to do is love and protect Xiaolan from now on. Both of their smiles were so warm and heartwarming. This scene seemed to have been frozen in time. A clear and childish voice rang out. And Lin faltered for a moment before looking at little Xiaolan with excitement in his eyes. Little Xiaolan. I'm Enlin. Enlin was beside himself with excitement. He knew that little Xiaolan was doing her best to call out his name. Su Xiaolan still had her memories, but she was indeed a little child in her current state. And little Xiaolan grabbed onto Enlin's collar and continued to speak. Her toothless mouth was a little leaky, and her voice sounded like a baby. Enlin was moved to tears, and he patiently guided her. Lin, little Xiaolan's eyes lit up, and she seemed to have thought of a solution. Papa, boom. And Lin felt as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning, and he was rooted to the spot. Little Xiaolan had dealt him a critical blow, and he was starting to doubt his life. A father's love is like a mountain, and Lin felt like he was being crushed by a mountain, and he was almost unable to breathe. I treat you as my Tao partner. You're calling me Papa. And Lin was starting to doubt his life. Little Xiaolan lay in Lin's arms, and her head was pressed tightly against Lin's chest as she stroked his chest with a hint of attachment. And the news that Lin had become the great Empress Vermilion Bird's guardian instantly spread throughout the entire Vermilion Bird tribe. All of the Vermilion Bird tribe powerful beings went to the Vermilion Bird Palace to pay their respects to the great Empress Vermilion Bird. It was actually just paying respects to a little girl who was sucking on milk. High Priestess Hong Wu was a sexy female vermilion bird, and she offered to feed little Xiaolan to her guardian, Enlin. When Su Xiaolan saw the milk that was offered to her, she also let loose an excited cry, and her bright eyes expressed her desire to drink it. Enlin had somehow become a nanny, but he had no milk to feed little Xiaolan. What could he do? He could only feed little Xiaolan with High Priestess Hong Wu's milk. He had used his divine inspection technique to verify that the milk was very safe, very healthy, and there were no harmful substances in it. It was just pure vermilion bird power, and it was beneficial to the baby's development. And Lin held the milk bottle in his arms, and he stuffed the bottle into little Xiaolan's mouth as he walked. He didn't know what to do. He hadn't even married little Xiaolan, and he was already a nanny. How was he supposed to explain this? However, this Vermilion Bird Palace was really huge. The palace spanned a radius of several dozen kilometers, and the floor was crimson gold in color. There were statues of all different shapes and sizes scattered about, all of which exuded extremely pure flame power. There were countless mysterious and profound diagrams on the walls, and a series of pillars with divine flames of different colors revolved around them to support the dome of the palace. 2 hours later, within the Vermilion Bird Palace, Enlin sat down on a high throne with Su Xiaolan in his arms. Before him, several dozen Tao integration stage vermilion birds and over 1,000 return to void stage vermilion birds knelt to the ground at the same time. Enlin announced expressionlessly, "I hereby announce the establishment of the new Vermilion Bird Empire. Long live Great Empress Vermilion Bird. Long live the Vermilion Bird Tribe." All of the Vermilion Bird powerful beings yelled in unison. Chapter 1942. Enlin sighed with emotion in his heart. In the prideful Vermilion Bird Tribe, he was second only to the Vermilion Bird Tribe. That's right, he was second only to little Xiaolan and above all other vermilion birds. The new Vermilion Bird Empire's court conference has begun. Officials, hurry up and say what you want to say, Enlin said impatiently as he carried little Xiaolan in his arms. Never would Enlin have thought that he would become the acting emperor of the Vermilion Bird Tribe instead of the human race. However, he didn't feel any excitement or sense of accomplishment. What was so fun about talking to a bunch of birds? Furthermore, he had to carry little Xiaolan to this King court conference. A little girl who only knew how to suck milk and couldn't even speak properly. Wasn't it a little weird to carry her to court conference? However, the officials of the Vermilion Bird Tribe said that the great Empress Vermilion Bird had to be present. Otherwise, the court conference would be incomplete. A nanny father? What else could Lin do? He could only listen to little Xiaolan suck milk while the higher-ups of the Vermilion Bird Tribe chattered away. The restoration and reconstruction of the immortal vermilion star is estimated to last for 100 years and will cost up to 3 billion spirit stones. The cabinet has decided that the number 1 construction sect in the Vermilion Bird tribe, the Namu Vermilion Bird sect, will be responsible for the project. What do you think, Great Empress Vermilion Bird? A vermilion bird with very large eyes asked. Little Xiaolan blinked. Wah! And Lin replied expressionlessly. Approved. Thank you, Great Empress Vermilion Bird. The vermilion bird with very large eyes shed tears of gratitude. Great Empress Vermilion Bird is wise and decisive. Our entire tribe is fortunate. As it retreated, it didn't forget to lick the general. An awe-inspiring vermilion bird in a suit of black armor made its way over with a respectful expression. I've captured a total of 3,629 spies from the Vermilion Bird tribe's territory. What should we do with them? And Lin waved a hand. Send them to mine. Great Empress Vermilion Bird is benevolent and benevolent. Our entire tribe is fortunate. The Vermilion Bird general licked the general before reluctantly retreating. A chorus of praise suddenly erupted from below the stage. Great Empress Vermilion Bird's benevolence knows no bounds, and her holy splendor is eternal. Great Empress Vermilion Bird's benevolence knows no bounds, and her holy splendor is eternal. And Lin, your Great Empress Vermilion Bird is currently drinking milk. Is it really appropriate for you to shamelessly praise her? Soon, another vermilion bird with golden feathers walked over. Esteemed Great Empress Vermilion Bird, your treasure vault and national treasury were both severely damaged during that battle. Do you want to move them or rebuild them here? Should he continue to refer to Su Xiaolan as junior sister, or should he refer to her as Great Empress Vermilion Bird? Emohai was in a dilemma. He looked at the little girl in Lin's arms, and his lips twitched involuntarily. It was so hard to refer to her as matriarch. This world really was a dreamy place. Brother and Lin, when are we going to return to the Tai Chu continent? Emohai asked with an uneasy expression. Wait for the wind to blow, and Lin replied with a contemplative expression. Tears welled up in Emohai's eyes, and he was on the verge of tears. Brother and Lin, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please say something that a mere mortal like me can understand? And Lin smiled. After I empty the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's treasure vault, I'll think about how to use the power of the Vermilion Bird tribe to lure the Vermilion Bird tribe onto our ship. After that, we'll rendezvous with Yang Yuan and Shangguan Yi before returning to the Azure Dragon tribe's territory and asking Patriarch Azure Dragon to open up the passageway for us. After all, he was the one who sent us here. If he doesn't send us back, I'll beat him to pulp. And Lin finished his sentence in one breath. Emohai was enlightened. This was indeed the best solution. Soon, a peculiar building appeared before Lin's eyes. This was a building that resembled a bird's nest. It was very much like an oval egg, and its exterior shimmered with vibrant colors under the sun. It wasn't very big, but it was as beautiful as a pearl. The golden vermilion bird led Lin to a circular gate. This is where the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's treasure vault is located. It has been fortified by layers of laws and restrictions set up by the former Great Empress Vermilion Bird, as well as the power of the entire planet. There's no other way to open it aside from using the power of the Holy Birth. And Lin carefully sensed his surroundings. Indeed, this barrier was so sturdy that it struck one with despair. He looked at the little girl in his arms with a smile. Little Xiaolan, it's all up to you now. Chapter 1943. Wah! The little girl's eyes were wide open, and she was still sucking on her pacifier as she looked up at Lin with confusion in her eyes. Lin spoke in a gentle voice. Little Xiaolan, I need you to unleash the power of your holy birth to open this treasure vault. Come, press here. He carried Su Xiaolan to the circular gate, which had a vermilion bird totem at the center of the gate. Press your palm against the center of the vermilion bird totem and activate the power of your holy birth. And Lin cradled Su Xiaolan in his hands as he inched closer to her. Sister Su Xiaolan is only 1 year old, and Mohai said. She's such a tiny baby. Will she even understand what you're saying? She can already call me Daddy and Lin. So how can she not understand? She's clearly transformed into a little girl with her memories. She understands everything I'm saying, but it's a bit difficult for her to speak, and Lin replied. The little girl nodded lightly. And Mohai believed him this time, but he was still worried. She's so young. Can she use the power of a saint? She can't even crawl. You're always carrying her. I don't know about that. Let her try. I don't believe she can resist the temptation of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's protection. And Lin replied with a smile. Little Xiaolan sucked on her finger as she listened to Lin's words. She looked at the totem before her with a blank expression, not knowing what to do next. Xiaolan, if you open this gate, all of the great Empress Vermilion Bird's treasures will be yours. Are you tempted? And Lin spoke with a scorching expression. Slap! Little Xiaolan slapped her palm against the center of the Vermilion Bird totem. Wah! An enraged cry sounded. A crimson energy flowed from her palm before merging into the gate. The gate instantly glowed with a brilliant light. Rumble! The gate slowly opened. Oh, what a mighty and honorable power! May the great Empress Vermilion Bird live on forever. The golden vermilion bird was so excited that all of its feathers stood on end as it lay on the ground. He really can use the power of a holy birth. Mohai's eyes widened in disbelief. He then looked at the little girl who was still clinging to Lin's arms and was puzzled. If she could even use the power of the vermilion bird holy birth, why couldn't Su Xiaolan fly by herself? Why was she always lying in Lin's arms? Little Xiaolan is the best. And Lin held the little girl in his arms and planted a fierce kiss on her delicate face. Little Xiaolan raised her chin with a smug expression. Just like that, and Lin carried Su Xiaolan into the vermilion bird's treasury. The golden vermilion bird stood guard outside the door. Mohai followed Lin into the vault. He wasn't going to take anything. He was just curious about what the vermilion bird's treasury looked like. Mohai knew quite a lot about the 4 most powerful secluded tribes. The Azure Dragon tribe loved to hide treasures and was known as the wealthiest tribe. The Vermilion Bird tribe loved to spend money and didn't have much money. Instead, they were in a lot of debt. Hence, it was hard to say whether the Vermilion Bird's treasury was rich or not. And Lin was feeling the same way as Mohai. He was afraid that he would happily open the Vermilion Bird's treasury only to find a mountain of promissory notes and all sorts of evidence. If that happened, his precious little Xiaolan would immediately choose to abdicate. They entered the Vermilion Bird tribe's treasury. Mohai discovered that he was wrong. And Lin discovered that he was wrong. The dazzling light from the treasures almost blinded them. The extremely rich energy fluctuations from the high-ranked treasures almost suffocated them. It was as if every breath they took was expending an immense amount of their aura. A series of phenomena manifested from treasures surged through the air. A crimson longsword hovered in mid-air, sweeping up a boundless rain of flames. A painting hung on an easel, and behind it was a magnificent landscape that was difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. Countless specks of light that resembled the light of fireflies danced like dancing dragons, twisting and turning their bodies as bursts of dragon roars reverberated through the air. This was just a phenomenon manifested by a clear pond. Aside from that, there were 2 pills that transformed into beasts that were battling one another in a corner. The shockwaves from their battle were no less powerful than a clash between Return to Void Stage mighty figures. They were exuding the aura of divine pills. Besides that, there were countless origin stones that emitted a white light scattered about, and a rough estimate showed that there were over 500,000 origin stones. They were piled up together, and the origin energy that was inadvertently drawn from them was magnificent like a tidal wave. After all, a single origin stone was equivalent to 10,000 spirit stones. Wow! Little Xiaolan's eyes widened as she stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before her. Divine tools, divine pills, billions of spirit stones. Her little heart couldn't help but beat wildly. There were so many treasures, more than she had ever seen in her entire life. The treasures within the Vermilion Bird treasure vault were beyond everyone's imagination, and Mohai's eyes were glued to the treasures before him, and he felt like he was about to suffocate from the aura of the treasures before him. These treasures seemed to be divine rank at the very least. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? This is way too ridiculous. And Lin wore a thoughtful expression. The former great Empress Vermilion Bird was an extremely proud person. Perhaps she felt that collecting treasures below the divine rank was an insult to her. She doesn't even care about spirit stones, and all the treasures here are spirit stones. And Mohai came to a sudden realization. You're right. This is truly an astonishing amount of wealth. I had thought that the Vermilion Bird tribe was the poorest tribe, but who would have thought that the great Empress Vermilion Bird's treasure vault would be so rich? Even the most inferior treasures here would be considered supreme treasures in the Vermilion Bird sect. And Lin smiled upon hearing this. The Vermilion Bird was a god of creation who had lived for countless years, so it's normal for her to have this much wealth. He then turned to look at little Xiaolan as he spoke. And Lin had already made a green dress for little Xiaolan, and it looked especially adorable. Little Xiaolan seemed to have sensed Lin's gaze, and she looked up at Lin with her big, round eyes. She sucked on her pinky as if she were asking what was going on. Little Xiaolan. And Lin held Su Xiaolan in his arms, and he said in a gentle voice, "You're still young, so I'll keep these treasures for you for now. I'll give them to you when you grow up." Little Xiaolan's action of sucking on her pinky stiffened, and she stared blankly at Lin with incredulity in her eyes. And Mohai was also astonished. Was this B***starred bullying a little child? He wanted to call the police. "Wah!" Little Xiaolan pouted. "I knew you'd agree. It's decided then." And Lin nodded with elation. Little Xiaolan, agree? Agree? When did this baby agree to it? At this moment, and Lin was already sprinting toward the treasures like a husky. 5. 2 billion spirit stones obtained. 8 divine tools obtained. 9 divine pills obtained. 15 unpolished divine rank materials obtained. 3 supreme treasures with even more powerful energy fluctuations than divine rank treasures obtained. And Lin was ecstatic. I'm rich. Chapter 1944. Wah! Little Xiaolan suddenly pointed at one of the divine pills in his arms as she let loose cries of excitement and anticipation. Do you want this? And Lin picked up a divine pill that was shrouded in golden flames and had a blooming divine flower on its surface. A white light flashed through his eyes. Divine inspection technique. Heavenly flame flower pill. A third-grade divine pill refined over 9,000 years using a sunflower that blooms in the sky realm with the most abundant flame power. It can refine the flame power within one's body, accelerate the growth of cultivators with fire-type bloodlines, and greatly replenish one's flame power. And Lin's eyes instantly lit up upon seeing this. Accelerate growth? Xiaolan, do you want to grow faster with this divine pill? Little Xiaolan nodded with anticipation in her eyes. Here, open your mouth. And Lin handed the heavenly flame flower pill to little Xiaolan without hesitation. Little Xiaolan opened her mouth and was just about to swallow the divine pill when she discovered that the divine pill was hovering right next to her mouth. She tried to bite the divine pill, but Lin moved the divine pill a little further away. Little Xiaolan stared at Lin with a blank expression. And Lin smiled. Call me husband first. I'll give it to you. Little Xiaolan stared blankly at Lin as tears welled up in her eyes. Brain. Little Xiaolan pouted. Good girl. A wide smile appeared on Lin's face as he stuffed the divine pill into little Xiaolan's mouth. For some reason, little Xiaolan was quite fun to watch. Little Xiaolan glared at Lin with resentment before swallowing the divine pill. Rumble, the strong and pure medicinal power, surged in her small body. Her snowy white body was tinged with a reddish-golden color due to the effects of the divine pill, and a terrifying power surged through her body as if she could explode at any moment. However, Lin wasn't worried that little Xiaolan would explode or be injured by the power of the pill. Even though little Xiaolan's body was small, she was definitely a holy beast, so she could take a few more divine pills. And Lin happily put away all the remaining treasures. There was one less divine pill, but there were still 8 that belonged to him. Oh no, he was just keeping it safe for Su Xiaolan. When Su Xiaolan grew up, he would still return her. He would not lie about this. Everyone knew that he could lie to anyone except for Su Xiaolan. And Lin was definitely an honest person. The 3 of them walked out of the Great Empress Vermilion Bird's treasure vault. Great Empress Vermilion Bird, Master Enlin. The golden vermilion bird immediately bowed to Enlin before asking with an expectant expression, "Where are you planning to move the Great Empress Vermilion Bird treasure vault to?" "We'll talk about it later. Close the door." Enlin smiled kindly. The door closed with a rumble. Without the power of the sage seat, the door couldn't even be opened. So where did the treasures go? What did these vermilion birds know? Enlin then suggested that they visit the Vermilion Bird Tribe's treasury. There were many things in the treasury, including all kinds of materials. There were countless ores and cultivation resources, but they were all mortal, spirit, immortal, and not a single divine rank item. It looked like the divine rank items had all been taken away by the Great Empress. There were vermilion bird powerful beings guarding the treasury, so Enlin couldn't just take them away. Thus, they walked around the treasury and inspected the items before leaving the place that was exuding an extremely evil aura. "Now, we can bring Yang Yuan and Shangwani back," Enlin said with a smile. They returned to the Vermilion Bird Palace and arrived before a red crystal ball. This was the Quantum Dao Entanglement Communication Ball. Even if they were separated by tens of thousands of light years, they could still communicate with one another in an extremely stable manner. And Lin could already see a few missed calls on the ball. One was from White Tiger, one was from Xian Wu, one was from Azure Dragon, and one was from Psychic Sage. All of the missed calls were from powerful beings, so this wasn't a surprise. The proud former Great Empress Vermilion Bird probably thought that these people weren't powerful beings and didn't even have the right to call her. And Lin thought for a moment before dialing White Tiger's number. "Little Xiaolan, can I talk to White Tiger on your behalf?" And Lin held Su Xiaolan in his arms with a buoyant smile on his face. "Why?" Little Xiaolan waved her arms lightly as her eyes darted around. It was hard to tell whether she agreed or not, but Lin took it as a yes. Do. Soon, the other party picked up the call. "Ha! Esteemed new Vermilion Bird, I am White Tiger. Congratulations on inheriting the Holy Birth." An extremely authoritative voice sounded from the other end of the voice transmission talisman, sounding like countless bolts of thunder roaring in unison. "Wah!" Little Xiaolan replied in a crisp voice. The other end of the communication ball fell silent. "You're the Vermilion Bird?" The voice asked hesitantly. Little Xiaolan nodded. "White Tiger, what was going on? Didn't the Vermilion Bird already transform into a mature and charismatic holy beast? Why did it sound like a human doll?" However, there was no way that it could activate this communication ball unless it was the Vermilion Bird. It had to be the Vermilion Bird. "Respected Vermilion Bird, our White Tiger clan recognizes your identity and supports all of your decisions. The previous trade exchanges and cooperation in various affairs are still running as usual. There won't be any changes. You don't have to worry about this." The White Tiger braced himself and explained the purpose of his visit. Little Xiaolan was elated. Wah. White Tiger's head was about to explode. "Holy F***, CK. What the hell are you saying? Are you happy? Or do you have something to say? Do you need to change anything?" Ha! I knew that the esteemed Vermilion Bird would definitely agree. "I'm very happy to continue working with you." White Tiger chuckled. "Who cares what she's saying? I can't understand her anyway, so I'll just take it as her agreeing. Hello, I am the guardian of the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. My name is Lin." Suddenly, a warm voice sounded from the communication ball. White Tiger shuddered upon hearing this. Heavens! Someone that he could understand had finally arrived. He knew that there was an extremely powerful human on the immortal Vermilion Star who had cooperated with the new Vermilion Bird to kill the former Vermilion Bird. This was probably the man before him. "Hello, esteemed Tang Bazong. White Tiger knew that in Lin's Dao title was Tang Bazong, so it felt more comfortable to refer to him by his Dao title. And Lin, hello. I trust that you've already had a very pleasant conversation with the new vermilion bird. Actually, I have a small request to make. A pleasant conversation? Are you kidding me? White Tiger repressed his urge to retort. Please speak, Mr. Tang Bazong. I can satisfy your request to the best of my abilities. I have a friend by the name of Yang Yuan, and he has most likely arrived at your White Tiger territory. If Mr. White Tiger discovers him, please allow him to come to our vermilion bird territory through the teleportation spell formation. And Lin explained. White Tiger was astonished again. Yang Yuan is your friend. And Lin's eyes lit up. Oh, he is indeed my friend. From your tone, it seems like you already know where he is. Then can you? No, White Tiger replied. Chapter 1945. And Lin was a little dumbstruck by White Tiger's outright rejection. Why? He asked with a perplexed expression. Because my daughter has fallen in love with him, and I can't control her. As such, I can't do anything about Yang Yuan if she refuses to let him go, White Tiger replied with a resigned expression. And Lin was astonished. Little Xiaolan was astonished. And Mohai was also astonished. White Tiger's daughter had fallen in love with Yang Yuan. Holy F***CK. Was Yang Yuan really that bad *SS? And Mohai immediately felt like he was so useless and disappointing. While he had been working so hard at mining, Yang Yuan had already hooked up with White Tiger's daughter. How infuriating. Can I speak to Yang Yuan? And Lin asked. Of course you can. You can talk to each other. I'm actually not opposed to Yang Yuan being with my daughter. It's all up to them. White Tiger was surprisingly open-minded when it came to this matter. And Lin had initially thought that the White Tiger was the type of ferocious beast that would annihilate an entire family at the slightest provocation. Now, however, it looked like the White Tiger was quite a reasonable beast. Was it because he doted on his daughter, or because of his power and status? Soon, Yang Yuan's excited voice sounded from the other end of the communicator. And Lin, is it really you? Su Xiaolan inherited the Holy Birth? So you were the ones who slew the vermilion bird in the southernmost part of the realm of stars. Yang Yuan spoke with an extremely excited expression, and Lin answered all of his questions. Even though he was already mentally prepared, Yang Yuan was still quite emotional upon hearing this confirmation. Who would have thought that you and Sister Su Xiaolan would achieve such an earth-shattering feat? Our human race has a much better chance against the heavenly human tribe now. Yang Yuan exclaimed, and Lin was quite elated that Yang Yuan was able to immediately think of the human race in such a situation. Brother Yang Yuan, what happened at the White Tiger's territory? I heard you and little sister White Tiger, And Lin chuckled. Don't tease me, and Lin sighed. A resigned expression appeared on Yang Yuan's face as he said, I accidentally used my holy flame to help Bai Xiaohu's daughter, Bai Xiaohu, cleanse her of the frost poison in her body. I was just trying to form a good relationship with her, but who would have thought that I would end up marrying her instead? Bai Xiaohu is currently pursuing me crazily. In fact, even after learning that I'm already married, she doesn't mind it at all. She even said that she doesn't mind sharing a husband with her. And Lin's eyes burned with passion. Awesome. Little Xiaolan sucked on her thumb as she looked at Lin from the corner of her eyes. And Lin immediately flew into a rage and said, This is simply a twisted and immoral behavior of Tiger. Bai Xiaohu is really shameless to do this. Sigh. It's a pity that I won't be able to help you through the White Tiger. Do you have any way to come to the vermilion bird territory and we can go back together? I'll give it a try, but Bai Xiaohu keeps following me, and it's giving me a headache. If worst comes to worst, I'll have to take Bai Xiaohu back to the Taichu continent with me. Yang Yuan spoke with a distressed expression, and Lin thought to himself, Isn't this even better? However, he didn't say this out loud. Take care, brother Yang Yuan. We'll wait for you for a few days. Xiaolan and I will be at the vermilion bird territory for the next few days. After chatting for a while longer, the two of them ended the call. Sigh. I don't know if brother Yang Yuan had a miraculous encounter or misfortune. Even though he obtained the core inheritance of the White Tiger and received a lot of protection from the White Tiger, He also gained an extremely annoying by Xiao, and Lin couldn't help but glance at him. Oh, hi. Do you really not know if this is a miraculous encounter or misfortune? Obtaining a top-rate inheritance, marrying the white tiger beauty, and progressing toward the pinnacle of cultivation. If this isn't a miraculous encounter, then what is? After pausing for a moment, Lin dialed Xian Wu's number. Hello, Great Empress Vermilion Bird. On behalf of the Xian Wu tribe, I wish to congratulate you on successfully inheriting the Holy Birth. I also hope that our cooperation will continue to improve. Xian Wu immediately began to talk to himself as if he were in a hurry. Su Xiao Lan Hua. So, huh? Xian Wu faltered upon hearing the tender voice. Vermilion Bird? Xian Wu asked. Yeah, little Xiao Lan replied. Xian Wu. After that, it was naturally the guardian and spokesperson in Lin's turn. And Lin chatted with Xian Wu for a while. He hadn't even asked about Shangguan Yi when Xian Wu brought her up. Sigh. To tell you the truth, I'm currently recovering from my injuries. The Xian Wu heart essence was accidentally damaged, and I'm trying my best to suppress the backlash from the Xian Wu heart essence. Otherwise, I would definitely pay you a visit to congratulate you, Xian Wu said with a distressed expression. Oh, who was that powerful? Who was able to damage your Xian Wu heart essence? And Lin was instantly curious. It was a female cultivator. Sigh. I don't know if it has anything to do with her. In any case, I've been extremely unlucky ever since she came. I suspect that this is a karma weapon secretly given to me by my enemies. Xian Wu's head throbbed with a headache. Immediately afterward, it caused the arcane ball to leak and engulf the entire planet. A torrential downpour suddenly descended in the rainbow sky. He complained to Lin about the chaotic lightning and the sudden attack on the Xian Wu heart essence. Even though all of these incidents are natural occurrences, I have a feeling that there's something more to this Shangguan Yi than meets the eye. Xian Wu spoke with conviction. Hence, I locked her up in prison and plan to interrogate her slowly. Lin and Mohai. What did they just hear? Shangguan Yi. Holy F asterisk CK. Was Sister Shangguan Yi's halo of misfortune already this bad? Asterisk SS? She was already slaughtering her way through the Xian Wu domain. Mohai looked as if he had been dealt a heavy blow, and he squatted on the ground like a sea cucumber. I'm so useless. Why am I so useless? All of you ring holders are doing very well in the Holy Beast domain, but I'm the only one who's fit to mine in the Vermilion Bird domain. And Lin couldn't help but take another glance at Mohai. Doing very well? Sister Shangguan Yi was already locked up in prison, and that was still doing very well? It's like this, Mr. Xian Wu, if I may be so bold as to make a request. This is also an instruction from the Great Empress Vermilion Bird. And Lin mustered up his courage. If you have any requests, just tell me. I will definitely do my best to help you. Black Tortoise's reply was extremely straightforward, and he almost patted his chest as he spoke. And Lin spoke in a serious voice. Shangguan Yi is actually my friend, and I swear on my name that these unfortunate events have nothing to do with Shangguan Yi. Please let her go. Xian Wu. A long period of silence ensued. I understand, Xian Wu suddenly said. Thank you, Mr. Xian Wu. I understand now. This is all a conspiracy. Xian Wu interjected before Lin had a chance to finish his sentence. You're friends with her. I get it now. You're both top-tier assassins. Your mission was to go to the Vermilion Bird territory to assassinate the Vermilion Bird, while Shangguan Yi's mission was to come to the Xian Wu territory to assassinate me. You two succeeded, but Shangguan Yi was exposed by me. Now, you try to use the Vermilion Bird's name to get her back. Tell me the truth. Who was the one who gave you the rings? If I'm not mistaken, do you have friends in the White Tiger domain as well? Do you have friends in the Azure Dragon domain as well? Xian Wu chuckled coldly. He idiot. I'm not going to fall for it. Chapter 1946. Lin and Mohai were all dumbstruck and speechless. What kind of strange brain circuit is this, to be able to make up these things in the brain? Mr. Xian Wu, I think you're overthinking things. This is all just your speculation. You have to have evidence before you make a judgment. You're going to disappoint me. And Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. You're going to hurt our friendship. Don't try to explain yourself. I've already discovered the truth. I will no longer listen to you bewitching me here and making me make a fatal mistake. Black Tortoise flew into a rage and hung up the connection. And Lin and Mo Hai looked at each other speechlessly. Idiot, little Xiaolan said in a crisp voice. And Lin looked at the little girl in his arms with elation on his face. Little Xiaolan, you can finally speak. You've grown up. This is great. Mo Hai's mouth gaped open in shock. Is that the point? Shouldn't the point be that Sister Su Xiaolan's first sentence is idiot? She's absolutely right. And Lin raised the angelic little girl high into the air with glee. Little Xiaolan, you're so smart. Yeah. Little Xiaolan was elated to hear this. Mo Hai was speechless upon seeing this. What do we do then? What about Sister Shangwani? Mo Hai asked with a concerned expression. Don't worry. We'll just lead our army to the Xianwu territory. If they don't release her, we'll fight them. And Lin spoke with a nonchalant expression. Mo Hai couldn't help but draw a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. What a domineering plan. They were facing one of the most powerful holy beasts in the realm of stars, and they were going to start a war just like that. You really could do whatever you wanted with power. How enviable. However, not long after that, and Lin's communication ball began to flash again. He picked it up to find that it was Xian Wu contacting him, and Lin accepted the communication ball with a smile. What is it, Xian Wu? Mr. and Lin, I just performed another divination, and the probability of you being assassins is very small. Perhaps I'm overthinking things. I apologize for my impulsive behavior, Xian Wu said with an apologetic expression. Damn it, how could he be so fickle? And Lin and Mo Hai complained in their hearts at the same time. Xian Wu knew that there was something wrong with his previous attitude, and he continued, Mr. and Lin, I believe you. I'll send someone to escort Shangwani back to the Vermilion Bird domain in one piece and give her some treasures as compensation. Is that enough? Black Tortoise, you're too polite. Then, I'll wait for my friend to come. And Lin chuckled. This is what a nice conversation should be like. The two of them chatted for a while before hanging up the phone reluctantly. Immediately afterward, and Lin called the little black dragon back. It could be said that Patriarch Azure Dragon was the god of creation who knew Lin the best, but now he felt like he was the god of creation who had the hardest time understanding Lin. The more he understood Lin, the more confused he became. And Lin's strength had evolved far too quickly, to the point where no one would believe him if he told them about it. He was already completely unable to keep up with Lin's rapid growth. Patriarch Azure Dragon kept asking about the details of his battle with the great Empress Vermilion Bird. He was very curious about how Lin had defeated her. However, this involved Lin's trump card, so he wasn't going to divulge it. In any case, he told Azure Dragon not to ask any more questions. Patriarch Azure Dragon was very exasperated, but that didn't stop him from thinking that Lin was very bad *SS. Lin asked Patriarch Azure Dragon if he could send them back to the Taichu continent, to which Patriarch Azure Dragon replied that there was no problem. He had already set the coordinates of the gap in the barrier, but it would expend a lot of energy, so he had to make some preparations in advance. After confirming that they could go back, Lin hung up the phone with elation in his heart. He turned his attention to the last person he had contacted, the psychic sage. This was a very unfamiliar person. He didn't know this person from the realm of stars. Sage. Could it be that he was a human? However, wasn't the most powerful human in the realm of stars only at the Tao integration pinnacle stage? Who was this psychic sage? How did he have the right to communicate with the great Empress Vermilion Bird? And Lin had saved him for last, mainly because of how mysterious he was. And Lin began to call the psychic sage. Then, the call was instantly picked up. And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing this. Anyone who instantly picked up his call was either someone who cared about him or someone who liked him. Coincidences that happened to be looking at a communication ball were extremely rare. Congratulations to Ms. Su Xiaolan for ascending to the Vermilion Bird Holy Birth. Congratulations to Ms. and Lin for attaining the Peerless War God Tao. Psychic Sage is here to congratulate you. A somewhat old, but exceptionally carefree voice rang out. It was a voice that was extremely comfortable to listen to. And Lin and Little Orchid were both given a fright at the same time. The other party knew who they were, and Lin was even more astonished. What was the Tao of the war god? Did he have such a Tao? Could it be that the other party knew that his system was called the God of War system? You the psychic sage? Do we know each other? And Lin became more cautious. Haha, we've never met before, but I've heard of you, and you've definitely heard of me. Hearty laughter sounded from the communication ball. The psychic sage is my alias in the realm of stars. On the Taichu continent, my name is Downlord Imperial Jade, or the Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure. Gasp, and Lin and Little Orchid were truly astonished this time. The other party was the Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure of the Three Pure Ones. The other three pristine ones were famous. One was the Lord of Tao and Virtue, Taishang Lao Jun, and the other was the primeval Lord of Heaven and Earth, Pangu. How weak could Lingbao Tianzuan be to be called the three pristine ones alongside the other two? He was definitely a powerful being. Hello, Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure. And Lin immediately acted like a newbie. Yeah. Little Orchid also greeted him warmly. Emohai was so astonished that he couldn't speak. He could actually hear the voice of a legendary being here. I'm so excited. What do I do? Should I do something to cooperate with them? The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure seemed to be very elated. There's no need to be so polite with me. To be honest, I've been paying attention to all of you for a long time, and I'm amazed by your growth. Who would have thought that the woman that old Lord Taishang saved would replace the vermilion bird in the end? Sometimes, things in this world are just that mysterious. This is a feat that even I couldn't predict. A light blush appeared on Little Orchid's face, and she leaned her head against Lin's chest shyly. And Lin asked, Senior, what do you mean by I've attained the Tao of the War God? Could it be that you know something about this? Little Orchid's ears perked up upon hearing this. This is something that a friend of mine who wishes to remain anonymous told me. He said that he entrusted you with the opportunity to become an invincible war god, as well as the mission to save the world. You did very well, and he was very pleased. The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure smiled, and Lin almost exploded upon hearing this. It had to be him, Downlord Luya. Chapter 1947. Then, Senior, do you know where Downlord Luya is? And Lin asked with a fake smile. Oh my, you know it's him? The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure was very surprised, and Lin's lips twitched. He had known for a long time, but he hadn't had a chance to thank him. The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure's tone confirmed Downlord Luya's suspicions. The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure's tone suddenly became profound again. He said that it's not time for him to meet all of you yet. What's going to come will come, and it's all up to fate. And Lin gritted his teeth. What a good, what's going to come will come. I'm actually communicating with all of you because I want to inform all of you of a very important matter. Ms. Su Xiaolan, you have already fulfilled the conditions to transcend and can escape from this universe to avoid being hunted down by the representatives of the Heavenly Tao. Do you want to do that? The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure asked. Everyone was dumbstruck upon hearing this. Su Xiaolan could transcend this world? I've transcended, and I'm still going to beat up the heavenly gods? Little Xiaolan asked with difficulty in a slurred voice. Of course not. If you transcend, you will no longer belong to this universe. You will be able to look down from above. However, if you intervene in this world and attack a heavenly god, then you will suffer an extremely violent backlash from heaven and earth that will instantly take your life. The Heavenly Lord of Numinous Treasure replied, That's all right. Leave the mission of saving the world to me. Little Xiaolan can just watch me from the outside. And Lin held Little Xiaolan in his arms with a doting smile on his face. Little Xiaolan immediately shook her head upon hearing this, and she immediately replied, No. And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this before a gentle expression appeared on his face. Good girl. Transcend first and enjoy the scenery outside. There's no need to waste time with the heavenly gods. No. I want to be with an in. Little Xiaolan forced herself to say this with a blush on her face. I'd rather die if I can't fight with you. And Lin fell silent upon hearing this. And Mohai widened his eyes at the sight before him. Primogenitor, numinous treasure's words broke the silence. Young man, don't make a decision so early. The benefits of transcending this world are far greater than you can imagine. No, little Xiaolan's voice was firm. Primogenitor Lingbao pondered for a moment. Why don't you listen to me first about the benefits of transcending? I won't listen. I won't listen. Little Xiaolan shook her head like a rattledrum. And Lin's heart softened, and he no longer tried to stop little Xiaolan's decision. He knew that although little Su Xiaolan was small in stature, Su Xiaolan was still the same Su Xiaolan. It was only her appearance that had changed. Once Su Xiaolan had made up her mind, she would not change. All right, if you change your mind, remember to look for me. You can contact me using the vermilion bird communication ball. The primogenitor of numinous treasure sighed helplessly. Little Xiaolan pouted and laid her head on Lin's body, completely ignoring the primogenitor of numinous treasure. And Lin thought about it for a moment before asking the question that he wanted to know the most. Senior, you know that the entire Taichu continent is currently facing a calamity. What's your stance on this? He was asking about you, so he clearly didn't understand why so few gods of creation had joined the fray so far. The heavenly lord of numinous treasure chuckled. The gods of creation of the realm of stars will definitely be watching from the sidelines, and there are only so many gods of creation on the Taichu continent. From what I know, only Cyril, Chun Chun, and Yuhua will definitely step in. Among the Taoist trinity, I like to roam the infinite worlds, so I won't interfere in this matter. Elder Taishang might step in, and Pangu has left this universe a long time ago. As for Doubtful Luya, I don't know what he's thinking either. And Lin fell silent upon hearing the heavenly lord of numinous treasure's words. He thought that he would have more allies. However, in reality, there were only a few heavenly gods who were opposing the heavenly gods. All of the god of creation stage powerful beings possessed the transcendental power to evade the heavenly gods, so they were a lot more hesitant in this situation. After all, their lives were extremely valuable, and they all had trump cards to protect themselves, so why would they risk their lives? There's no need to be too pessimistic. Our human race still has a chance of winning. At the very least, Dalord Luya and I have high hopes for you. The heavenly lord of numinous treasure smiled. What do you have in mind for me, senior? And Lin raised his head. You're quick-witted, brave, supremely talented, powerful, decisive, limitless potential, extraordinary disposition. The heavenly lord of numinous treasure rattled off countless adjectives in one go. And Lin chuckled. Even though it's all nonsense, it's still very pleasant to hear. Little Xiaolan rolled her eyes, and Mohai heaved a faint sigh. Brother and Lin really is an honest man. The heavenly lord of numinous treasure chuckled. Mr. Lin really is an interesting man. I'll be sure to drink with you the next time I return to the Taichu continent. Sure. Remember to come to the 4-9 Immortal sect as a guest. And Lin also smiled. The two of them chatted for a while before hanging up. And Lin thought for a moment before placing the vermilion bird quantum entanglement communication ball into Su Xiaolan's storage ring. This thing was not going to be left in the vermilion bird palace. Who knew when it would return to the vermilion bird territory? Peace and quiet resumed. After that, it was time for the cultivation daddy to slack off. And Lin would attend morning court, hold little Xiaolan in his arms, and feed her milk. His days were carefree and carefree. As for the third wheel, Mo Hai, and Lin used his authority as the great Empress Vermilion Bird to open up all of the cultivation mystic realms, observation holy lands, and all types of opportunities for him. Mo Hai was extremely touched by this. The Vermilion Bird Miner had risen to prominence through his mysterious connection with the Vermilion Bird Miner. He was the biggest winner among the 3 holy beast rings. Brother and Lin, meeting you is the greatest blessing of my life. And Mo Hai was moved to the point of tears. You should be more grateful to little Xiaolan. This is her privilege. And Lin held the adorable little girl in his arms with a buoyant smile. Sister Xiaolan, meeting you is the greatest blessing of my life. Emohai spoke in a serious tone. A faint smile appeared on little Xiaolan's face, and the radiant sunlight shone upon her flawless features, making Emohai feel as if he had seen the most beautiful angel in this world. That's right, she's an angel, Emohai thought to himself. One day, within the Vermilion Bird Palace, Enlin opened his bleary eyes as he sniffed the familiar fragrance beside him. He was greeted by the sight of a little girl who was still fast asleep. Enlin knew that the little girl beside him was Su Xiaolan, but he couldn't help but feel like he was mistaken when he looked at her figure. Her luscious, black hair had already begun to fall over her shoulders, and her snowy white, smooth skin was exposed. Her eyebrows had already matured, and she was extremely beautiful. Most importantly, the green dress that Enlin had made for her was no longer fitting. Her slender, well-proportioned legs were completely exposed, and they glowed with a jade-like luster. This, Enlin's eyes widened. The little girl opened her eyes, which were even more dazzling than the stars. Enlin? What is it? Enlin drew a sharp intake of breath. Little Xiaolan has become a super lowly 1-year-old Xiaolan. Now, she had become a 3-year-old Xiaolan. Chapter 1948. My God, my Xiaolan. Enlin let loose a cry of surprise. What is it? Little Xiaolan asked in a daze. Then she realized something. Her eyes widened and she exclaimed, "Oh my God, I can speak fluently now. I can finally speak." Little Xiaolan wept tears of joy. That's great. That's really great. I thought I was going to have to whimper for the rest of my life. The little girl wiped away her tears with her soft, white hands. That's right. Even I get anxious for you when you have trouble speaking. Enlin pinched little Xiaolan's delicate face. It feels even better now. A blush appeared on little Xiaolan's face as she glared at Enlin with her large, bright eyes. Don't you feel guilty for laying your hands on such a tiny little girl? It's fine as long as it's Xiaolan. Enlin hugged the little girl in front of him and stroked her soft, silky hair. He then kissed her flawless, angelic face. 3-year-old Xiaolan is so adorable. Little Xiaolan rolled her eyes in exasperation and ignored him. Enlin made a new dress for Su Xiaolan. This was a beautiful pink princess dress. Xiaolan, you've always been wearing green and green clothes. It's time for a change. Go the cute little sweetie route. Enlin put the princess dress on little Xiaolan with a wide grin. That's great. Enlin looked at the little girl in front of him. She was so beautiful that she didn't seem to belong to this world. After putting on the Death Barbie powder, she finally looked a little more down to earth. She was so adorable that he couldn't bear to part with her. Enlin brought out a bottle of vermilion bird milk from his storage ring. Here, drink, Grandma. Little Xiaolan replied expressionlessly. I'm not a 1-year-old baby anymore. I'm already 3 years old. She bared her white, jade-like teeth as she spoke. See, I have teeth now. That makes sense. If you have teeth, you can eat other things. Enlin said dotingly. Baby, what do you want to eat today? I'll make it for you. Little Xiaolan heaved a resigned sigh. Enlin, are you treating me like a daughter now? You already call me Enlin's daddy. How can I not be your daddy? Enlin said seriously. Little Xiaolan, I was just joking, but I took it seriously. Enlin held onto little Xiaolan's smooth little hand as they made their way out the door. Let's go see what kind of special ingredients the Vermilion Bird territory has. Father will personally cook. Great Empress Vermilion Bird reappeared on the immortal Vermilion Star. All of the Vermilion Birds were extremely excited. They discovered that Great Empress Vermilion Bird had grown up and become even more adorable. The heavens bless our tribe. Great Empress Vermilion Bird is developing so quickly, just like our Vermilion Bird tribe. What a perfect appearance. Great Empress Vermilion Bird has clearly transformed into a human, causing us to be unable to appreciate her beauty. However, in our eyes, she is still breathtakingly beautiful. She has become a breathtakingly beautiful being that can be admired by any tribe. All of the Vermilion Bird bootlickers immediately began to bootlick the 3-year-old Su Xiaolan. Enlin's horizons were greatly broadened by this type of praise that was fresh, refined, and non-repetitive. Rinpoche really wanted to ask them how they were able to act so naturally in front of the big shots of the other races and shamelessly suck up to the Empress. And Lin used great Empress vermilion birds cooking as an excuse to open the gates of the national treasury. He swept away all of the top-grade ingredients, including some spirit medicines and immortal medicines. The national treasury manager's heart throbbed with pain, but he didn't say anything. Everything was for the great Empress. Thus, Lin cooked an extremely scrumptious meal for little Xiaolan using fire-type ingredients unique to the vermilion bird territory. Little Xiaolan ate so much that she couldn't stop, and she kept asking for more. And Lin naturally agreed to all of little Xiaolan's requests in a doting manner. Who told her to be so adorable? The days were very ordinary. Time flew by. Not long after, guests arrived on the immortal vermilion star. A few turtles with powerful auras escorted an exquisitely beautiful woman in a blue dress onto the immortal vermilion star's teleportation spell formation. The woman was immediately greeted by the sight of a familiar-looking man smiling at her. "Sister Shangwan, thank you for your hard work these past few days." The man smiled warmly. And Lin, tears welled up in Shangwan Yi's eyes. She had been through far too much in the past few days. If it weren't for Lin's help, who knew what would have happened to her? At this moment, a crisp, tender voice sounded. "Sister Shangwan, it's all in the past now. Now that you're on my territory, no one will be able to bully you." Shangwan focused her gaze to discover that there was an extremely beautiful little loli straddling Lin's shoulders with her legs spread open. Her body was pressed tightly against the back of Lin's head, and she was grabbing onto Lin's hair with her slender little hands as she spoke with an elated smile. For some reason, she felt like this little loli was extremely familiar. "What? You don't recognize me, Sister Shangwan?" The little loli cocked her head to the side with a sweet smile on her face. Shangwan suddenly thought of someone, and she was astonished. Your Sister Xiaolan. My God, how did you become like this? Didn't you already inherit the vermilion bird holy birth? What's going on with you becoming smaller?" "Sigh, I don't know either." Su Xiaolan splayed open her hands and shook her head. "Even though I inherited the holy birth, this holy birth has been ravaged to the point where it can't do anything. It can only hide in a corner and slowly recover. It's not taking care of me now, it's me taking care of it instead, which led to an accident when I was ascending to the Holy Ascension stage. I expended too much energy, and my body became smaller. If I want to return to my original size, I'll have to recover step by step." Shangwan Yi's eyes lit up upon hearing this. "It's good that you can return to your original size. Speaking of which, Xiaolan is really adorable like this." "Right, I think so too." And Lin chuckled as he reached out to pinch Xiaolan's cheek, only to have his hand mercilessly slapped away by Xiaolan. And Lin slid down and pinched Xiaolan's slender waist to find that it was so bouncy. Shangwan, he couldn't bear to watch this interaction. "By the way, where's Mo Hai? I heard he's also in the vermilion bird territory," Shangwan asked. Mo Hai is really something. He received many inheritances in the vermilion bird trial mystic realm and is about to progress to the return to void intermediate stage. And Lin gave her a thumbs up. Shangwan nodded. "That's great. I've also progressed to the Tao integration intermediate stage." And Lin was astonished. "That fast? You also received the core inheritance of Xianwu?" "No." Shangwan shook her head. "I was thinking about life when I was trapped in the prison, and I suddenly had an epiphany, thereby allowing me to progress to the next level." And Lin, in comparison, it felt like Minor Missouri was still quite lowly. He had received so many inheritances, but he had only made a small breakthrough. He couldn't even compare to the imprisoned Shangwan Yi. How embarrassing. Just as they were thinking this, a dazzling light suddenly erupted from the teleportation spell formation again. "This is..." And Lin sensed for a while before an elated expression appeared on his face. "This is the aura of the white tiger. Brother Yang Yuan is back. He really did it.